Chapter 1607. As the soul formation grand cultivators stood still, some nascent soul cultivators with powerful immortal wills had already sensed the vast energy in the sky, which belonged to Dharma laws. More than a dozen soul formation divine lords seemed to be scattered, but they seemed to have become one. Those Dharma laws that used to be scattered were twisted into a rope, which immediately became 10 times more tenacious and powerful. An invisible battle array had been established in the sky. I've given you a chance, but you don't cherish it. You'll regret your choice today. Jiang Tian stood with his hands behind his back and glanced at everyone coldly. Kong Teichu, you're indeed powerful. However, how can you cause trouble in the empire of deity? You've stirred up a storm of blood and plunged people into misery and suffering. That's unforgivable. As the Grand Chancellor of the Academy, I must kill you. Ban Shan said righteously. But Long Shengnan and the others saw a glint of fear in Ban Shan's eyes. He was just pretending to be tough at the moment, but he was weak inside. Kong Teichu, hand over the cultivation arts you've learned. We'll definitely beg for mercy in the Emperor of the Ruins Palace and spare your life. The sect master of the Huahua Grotto Heaven said with a deep look, but the greed on his face couldn't be concealed. Right. Greed. The sect masters of the Grotto Heavens and the masters of the families looked greedy right then, like a pack of hungry wolves staring at a piece of fat meat. Even though they were terrified of Jiang Tian's power, they wanted to replace him and have Jiang Tian's power. Jiang Tian was only a nascent soul cultivator, but he had such a powerful body and was able to fight against soul formation cultivators. The cultivation arts he had learned must be extremely advanced. If they could control those cultivation arts, any soul formation cultivator would have the power to compete with the 3 peerless giants, or even crush them. If that was the case, they wouldn't have to bow to the Emperor of the Ruins. They could establish their own sects and become ancestral patriarchs in the future. Thus, the reason why they attacked Jiang Tian was not only because this battle was unavoidable, but also because they desired to obtain Jiang Tian's inheritance and good fortune. Hand it over. A dozen soul formation cultivators stood in the sky and surrounded Jiang Tian. They shouted at the same time and released endless energy. The 2 Grand Chancellors of the Academy and the headmasters of the 5 Grotto Heavens, a total of more than 10 divine monarchs, released their power together. How terrifying it was. It could be said that such a scene had never appeared in the ruins of immortality before. The void within a radius of 100 miles had almost solidified into a piece of metal. This was the result of the support of multiple domains. Demonic qi, spiritual qi, and vital qi no longer existed, almost collapsing into oblivion. Countless types of power of laws appeared within it. Each and every one of them was extremely dense and could easily crush a nascent soul cultivator into dust. Facing a peerless killing god like Jiang Tian, no one dared to be negligent. Everyone took out their most prized Dao artifact. Rumble. Over 10 peerlessly terrifying auras shot into the sky, and they carried a peerless aura of slaughter. The might that contained the grand Dao fragments caused all the cultivators present to tremble and feel uneasy, and their hearts trembled violently. Only in the hands of a soul formation grand cultivator could the true power of a Dharma artifact and shock the world. You're courting death. Jiang Tian's eyes were cold and emotionless. His murderous intent rose. At first, he only wanted to kill Divine Emperor Laihua. After all, many Grotto Heavens and families were only following orders. They had signed a divine soul contract with the Emperor of the Ruins Palace and couldn't disobey at all. They had no choice. But then, the greed in their eyes completely infuriated Jiang Tian. Very well. Since all of you insist on seeking death, I shall grant your wish today. From today onwards, there will be no more 6 Grotto Heavens in the ruins of immortality. Jiang Tian was filled with murderous intent at the moment, and a cruel smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. He walked forward step by step as if there was a path to heaven. In the eyes of mortals, that scene was magical but not shocking. After all, qi refinement cultivators could fly. But to the soul formation cultivators, they were terrified. Crack! Crack! As Jiang Tian walked forward, layers of domains cracked one after another. The Dharma laws and grand Daos contained were torn apart like pieces of paper, unable to withstand a single blow. The soul formation cultivators were dumbfounded. At that moment, Jiang Tian still didn't use any Dharma laws or divine powers. He still used his body to tear apart the domains that they were proud of. No, to be exact, those domains didn't seem to exist. Da-da-da-da. Zhao Shanhe behind the divine lords, as well as Song Baoxin, Su Chongqing, Cheng Aojuan and the others who were further away, were all trembling. Attack! The sect master of the flower-washing grotto heaven shouted and attacked first. Luoing divine sword. As he shook his sword, the sword flew out and many sword chi dharma laws flew towards Jiang Tian with a whistling sound. The sword chi dharma laws were very magical and beautiful. They were like withered petals, sparkling and translucent. There were so many of them that it looked like a rain of flowers. But if one looked carefully, they would see that the petals were shining with essence chi and were engraved with dharma laws and Tao patterns. Their murderous intent was hidden in the beauty and dreamy, which was deceptive. Normal nascent soul stage cultivators might be intoxicated by it after a single glance. They would give up resisting and fighting and perish. 10,000 soul myriad banner. Du Qianlian. Have a taste of my hammer. Ruins Emperor Bell. As the sect master of the flower-washing grotto heaven attacked, the other overlords also attacked with all their might, hoping to kill their enemy with one strike. Ban Shan and Hai Hizi looked vicious and their eyes were vicious. They wanted to cut Jiang Tian into pieces to vent their anger. Boom. More than 10 soul formation divine lords attacked at the same time. What did that mean? At that moment, the entire Xiantian mountain range shook violently, and the ground was like a rag pulled by a child. The area within a few thousand miles turned into an ocean of violent energy that swept across like a hurricane. It was extremely shocking. Countless Dharma laws and energy clashed with each other, transforming, gathering and strengthening each other. They roared crazily and created some haze. The dimension completely collapsed and the dimensional fragments flew around like angry dragons, forming a terrifying storm. Only the Dharma laws were still stable. They became even more glittering and dazzling, more condensed and tough. A nascent soul cultivator would have died even if they touched it, not to mention entering it. Even a soul formation cultivator would be crushed to pieces if they entered. The cultivators outside, even if they were peak stage nascent soul cultivators, and had activated many defensive Dharma treasures, felt extremely uncomfortable. All of them felt extremely uncomfortable, almost to the point of wanting to die. Song Baoxin held his stomach and vomited without caring about his image. His divine soul had been affected by the energy, and his organs had been damaged. As for the golden core cultivators, they could only crawl on the ground and step back. They were already 3,000 miles away, and could only observe with their surveillance Dharma artifacts. Everyone could only see. Swish, swish, swish. Many peerless Taoist treasures gathered dazzling light or heavy auras. With long tails, they crossed hundreds of miles and crossed the sky to attack Jiang Tian like shooting stars chasing the moon. Every single Tao treasure possessed boundless might. Some pressed down to the point the ground sank, some slashed apart mountain ranges, some emitted furious howls of gale. And it seemed as if they'd opened up an expanse of hell. There were more than a dozen Tao treasures, each with their own strengths. They were peerless and their combined attacks were comparable to the 1,000 Tao cauldron. Even if Divine Emperor Lai Hu came back to life and had an immortal divine body, he wouldn't be able to resist. Master! Senior! At this moment, even the warriors of the great Ko country were shocked. Long Shengnan and Bai Muxue were even trembling. But Jiang Tian was calm, as if he didn't care about anything. Bang! Jiang Tian waved his sleeve. Under everyone's incredulous gaze, he directly shattered the Luoying divine sword. Numerous sword chi laws in the shape of petals flew out diagonally with tinkling sounds. They were like heavenly maidens scattering flowers as they cut through the ground and pierced through the mountains. Whoosh! At this time, Grand Chancellor Ban Shan's giant hammer also arrived. Golden Taoist connotations spread and dragon-like lightning surrounded it. The essence fire of the sun gushed out, and the wind whistled like a hurricane. Clang! Disdain appeared on Jiang Tian's face as he punched out. Clang! The giant hammer, which was strong enough to forge asteroids and break the sky, was shattered by Jiang Tian's fist. Countless tiny pieces shot into the sky. The great Tao of metal, fire and thunder in the world were affected, and the sky rumbled. Then Jiang Tian punched, kicked, slapped and pointed. He attacked 13 times in a row and shattered the 18 Tao treasures. Those Tao artifacts were supreme and almost immortal. They were made with countless precious materials in the ruins of immortality. Even if a star fell and the world was overturned, they might not be destroyed. But then Jiang Tian easily destroyed them. His fist, which looked like a body of flesh and blood, didn't even cause any damage. Divine body. That was the real divine body. Many soul formation grand cultivators were either affected by the backlash or were shocked. They hadn't come back to their senses. Jiang Tian stepped on the sky and the space 10 miles under his feet became flat again. He had already shot into the sky with the help of the space curvature. He flashed across the world and attacked Ban Shan and the others. Oh no! As soon as the sect master of the flower-washing cave heaven exclaimed, he saw Jiang Tian pass by Grand Chancellor Ban Shan's side like a flickering light. Grand Chancellor Ban Shan's body froze and his eyes were full of shock, unwillingness and fear. A hole appeared in his chest and it quickly expanded. Ban Shan couldn't repair it even if he used 9 kinds of recovery techniques. Jiang Tian's layers of fist energy and the destroyed gods quickly spread to his divine treasures, limbs and entire body like fireworks. The next moment, Grand Chancellor Ban Shan, who was known to have a tough body and the best melee fighter in the ruins of immortality, exploded inch by inch. His body, gods and divine soul all turned into ashes and disappeared in the air, as if they had never appeared. Jiang Tian defeated him with a single strike. Grand Chancellor Ban Shan was dead. Everyone was shocked. The counterattack has begun. Black and white, it's your turn. Jiang Tian laughed softly. His eyes were cold as he turned around like an illusion. He easily traversed 50 kilometers and arrived before Black and White Child. Senior, please show mercy. Junior surrenders. Black and White were terrified, and they staggered back as they cried out pitifully. Chapter 1608. Black and White had always been graceful, elegant and handsome. He was like an immortal that had descended, like a famous scholar of the Wei and Jin dynasties. But at this moment, under the approach of Jiang Tian, he was panicking like a stray dog, and was in an extremely sorry state. But no matter what, Black and White was approaching the Grand Chancellor of the Academy, and had been personally taught by the teacher. He had been famous for thousands of years and had rich battle experience, so he wasn't completely defenseless. Whoosh! The black and white ghost stones hovering around Jiang Tian suddenly turned into black and white qi, circling around him like rainbows. The 2 qi circulated continuously, growing endlessly. It was like a taiji diagram that contained the life and death law's great Tao, trying to block Jiang Tian's attack. You're just like an ant. Jiang Tian snorted and punched. Jiang Tian's punch was simple and unadorned. There was no fluctuation of magic power, nor was there any glow or auspicious colors, nor was there any rumbling of the great Tao or laws. There was only power. Pure and powerful power. Nothing could stop him from breaking through everything with brute force. Under this punch, the black and white taiji diagram immediately erupted with brilliant light. The laws within disintegrated, and the fragments of the great Tao turned into powder. Roar! Black and white roared into the sky, and the divine treasures in his body trembled. The gods suffered a strong backlash and split open in an instant. It was too late to retreat again. Crack! Jiang Tian's eyes were cold and emotionless without any ripples. His fist rushed forward violently, piercing through the broken and collapsing yin and yang fish diagram, and smashing into black and white's chest. Puff! Black and white spat out blood, and the blood was dazzling. There was already a deep fist print on his chest. With this fist print as the center, the violent force rippled out like ripples and instantly covered his entire body, reaching his divine treasures and limbs. It shook again and again. Pa pa pa! Black and white's bones instantly shattered into countless pieces. With a rumble, the divine treasures collapsed, and the god was also shattered. The next moment he completely turned into sparkling and translucent flesh rain that sprinkled down. Even his spirit was destroyed. Jiang Tian waved his hand and executed the Taotai restoration, swallowing all of black and white's scattered qi, blood, and spirit, turning them into cultivation resources. Satisfying. Jiang Tian twisted his neck and let out a string of popping sounds that sounded like beans being fried. A cruel and delighted smile appeared on the corners of his mouth, and the depression in his heart was swept away. Ever since Jiang Tian was reborn, even though he had slaughtered unhindered, he was actually very meticulous in his actions. If he wasn't 100% confident, he would definitely not act rashly. In the Steel Forest Forbidden Grounds, he had been surrounded by Black and White Child, Sword Servant Tong Yujian, and Ban Shan, and had almost perished. Of course, he was furious to the extreme. His cultivation had been raised to the limit. Today he had broken out of seclusion, killed his enemies, and exacted his bloody revenge. Jiang Tian was naturally overjoyed. Grand Chancellor. Senior. How could you die? Chancellor, Lord Chancellor, you have the creation mysterious technique, so you can definitely revive the two seniors, right? Or if I hand it over to Grand Chancellor Xian, who he will definitely be able to revive, right? Many chancellors, instructors, and disciples of the academy even knelt down with a plop, pounding the ground and wailing. Many of them had tears of blood in their eyes. Cheng Aojuan, Su Chongqing, Song Baoxin, and the other disciples were so shocked that they couldn't speak. They were full of disbelief. The Grand Chancellor and the direct disciples of the headmaster, Ban Shan and Black and White Child, could be said to be the pillars of the academy. Now that they had been killed by Jiang Tian, it was like a skyscraper collapsing and a heavenly pillar breaking. To the academy, it was an unbearable loss. As for the other cultivators, it was as if a basin of cold water had been poured over their heads. They felt cold from head to toe. Jiang Tian was too powerful. Killing the Grand Chancellor was as easy as killing a chicken. Those were the two Grand Chancellors of the academy. Their strength was completely on par with the sect masters of the Grotto Heavens, and they were only slightly weaker than the Inferno Divine Emperor. Yet they were so cruelly defeated. Many heads of aristocratic families and princes of states used to be high and mighty figures in the ruins of immortality, but at this moment, they were scared out of their wits. My lord is really too powerful. Long Xingnan and Bai Muxue finally heaved a sigh of relief and revealed beautiful smiles. Invincible, invincible, invincible. Fu Heishui and Fu Heishui were so excited that they were flying up and down, cheering with joy. Come on. Come and have a fight with my lord. Tian Shu was emboldened. He picked up the wine jar and gulped down the wine for a while. His eyes were red as he waved his long saber and shouted. Retreat. The sect master of the Tianmong Grotto Heaven roared. At this moment, he was already horrified. Jiang Tian was too powerful. The dignified soul formation realm cultivators were as fragile as paper in front of Jiang Tian. They were crushed by Jiang Tian with a casual slap. Their cultivation was only on par with Ban Shan and Black White. If they continued to fight, what good would the result be? In fact, everyone was also aware of this. They didn't have the slightest intention to fight at all. They just wanted to escape as quickly as possible. The situation took a turn for the worse. They were defeated like a landslide. Jiang Tian's consecutive killing of Ban Shan and Black White had shocked everyone. For a moment, escape lights rose from all directions. Streaks of golden light shot out in all directions. There were also crystal warships, flying boats, flying swords, and all kinds of other flying Dharma artifacts. They flew away in all directions as if they were avoiding snakes and scorpions. Since I'm here, how can I leave without saying goodbye? Jiang Tian chuckled. He stepped on the air, and his supreme power interfered with the laws. He stepped on the space and shot out with the curvature of space. They were the pillars of the empire of the ruins of immortality, second only to the Academy, Sky Palace, and the Ruins Emperor's Palace. Since they couldn't be used by him, he would kill them with a slap and kill them all so that they wouldn't be a hindrance in the peak battle. Boom. Jiang Tian's speed was simply unparalleled. With his pure physical strength, he actually surpassed the speed of the Xian secret art. In the blink of an eye, he caught up with the sect master of the Huanhua Grotto Heaven. This person was the first person to advocate a battle with Jiang Tian. He was very greedy and wanted to obtain Jiang Tian's cultivation methods and inheritance. Whoosh, whoosh. His figure was like a butterfly dancing on the ice. He was graceful and elegant, but his speed was extremely fast. However, the next moment he was stopped by Jiang Tian. The sect master of the Huanhua Grotto Heaven shouted, Taichu no Senior, no Your Majesty, I am willing to sign a divine soul contract with you and follow you to the ruins of immortality. I will be loyal forever and will never betray you. It's too late. Jiang Tian didn't move at all, and his eyes were cold. Taichu, do you really want to fight to the death with the ruins of immortality? You've already killed Emperor Sheng and the Grand Chancellor of the Academy. If you continue to kill, you will become the enemy of the entire world. No Grotto Heaven, sect or family will tolerate you. Besides, I'm a soul formation cultivator. How can I be controlled by you? Seeing this, the sect master of the Huanhua Grotto Heaven knew that it was impossible to be kind. His divine treasures trembled and rumbled. The gods sang and danced, as if they were chanting Buddhist scriptures. All kinds of wood element laws flickered around his body, and the falling flowers fell like rain, colorful and crystal clear. All kinds of sword chi patterns were engraved on it. It looked magnificent, but in fact one piece could easily kill a peak-stage nascent soul cultivator. At this moment, the sect master of the Huanhua Grotto Heaven activated all his power, and was ready to fight to the death with Jiang Tian. So what if I'm the enemy of the entire world? The ruins of immortality and the Southgate Galaxy are nothing to me. Seeing this, Jiang Tian just smiled and waved his right hand. Arg! An extremely shrill scream was heard, shaking the entire Xiantian mountain range, and even interfering with the laws of heaven and earth. Everyone saw this in horror. The sword chi contained all kinds of laws. It suddenly became chaotic and shot into the body of the sect master of the Huanhua Grotto Heaven. In an instant, the sect master of the Huanhua Grotto Heaven became a sieve with countless holes. Countless arrows of blood spurted out and dyed the sky red. Divine blood dripped on the ground, containing powerful vitality. The grass grew into trees and the mountain range was instantly covered in green. A god pushed open the door of the divine treasures, broke out of his body and ran away. This god looked like the sect master of the Huanhua Grotto Heaven when he was young. He ran away with a face full of fear. Do you think you can escape? Jiang Tian chuckled and used the laws of Tao Tai. It was like a black hole that directly swallowed this god. Another peerless divine being, the master of the Grotto Heaven, had died. In the blink of an eye, the conversation between the two of them was completed with their immortal will. Thousands of words were exchanged in an instant. So, in everyone's eyes, Jiang Tian had killed another soul formation overlord in the blink of an eye. At this moment, hundreds of thousands of cultivators from the ruins of immortality had already been scared out of their wits. They only wished their parents had given them 2 more legs. Fight! Assist the Lord, stop them. The Green Dragon King, Tu Fei, Niu Duotian and Yun Zhongzi looked at each other. Their eyes were glittering and their blood was boiling. They knew that the real counterattack, the bloody massacre, had begun. Chapter 1609. Let's join hands and kill them all. Not even a chicken or dog will be spared. Tu Fei laughed like a bandit. A powerful demonic chi shot up to the sky, as if a demon god that had been sealed for thousands of years had suddenly awakened. Arg! Kill! 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 Tian Shu had drunk too much. His drowsy and red eyes were as if they were stained with blood, which was extremely terrifying. He swung his broadsword and pounced forward. Kill! Furious roars filled the sky. The assassins of the great bandits had been besieged like stray dogs during this period of time. They had to vent all the pent-up anger in their chests. In an instant, many assassins of the great bandits attacked the cultivators of the Empire of the Ruins of Immortality. They overturned rivers and seas and tore the ground apart. They were invincible under the sky. Little kids, your skin is soft and tender. It's definitely delicious. Die. He Shui Fu broke through the space and invaded the flying boat of the Academy soldiers. He opened his bloody mouth and screamed. The sound waves were rolling, and many nascent soul cultivators' skin and flesh were torn apart. Some Jindan realm cultivators were even directly turned into powder. The jade-like floor of the flying ship was instantly covered with a layer of blood-red film. Countless broken bones and organ fragments were everywhere. There was nothing to be merciful about. The disciples of the Academy were actually from the 2nd level and 3rd level worlds, and belonged to the ancient deity land. But they had been brainwashed and were loyal to the Emperor of the Ruins, helping the evildoers and suppressing their own people. They were even more hateful than the invaders from the South Gate. Besides, Jiang Tian had already given them a chance, but they would never surrender. There was no need to be merciful. Fu Heishui's muscles were knotted and his body was covered with lumps of flesh. 2 huge wings covered with dense black hair flapped on his back, blocking the sky and the sun. His beam-like eyes were fierce and he bared his fangs. Various Dharma laws surrounded him and blue thunderbolts exploded. He really looked like a demon or a god. He attacked ruthlessly. When he slapped, a person would immediately turn into a pool of flesh and blood. He opened his mouth and sucked, immediately turning the cultivator into a mummy. Even his chi, blood and spirit were sucked out. The academy camp was already in chaos after the death of Banshan and the Black and White Suns. Now that they were invaded by Fu Heishui, they couldn't take it anymore. Run! Cheng Aojuan, Su Chongqing, Song Baoxin, and the other cultivators were all scared out of their wits. They abandoned their flying boats and fled on their flying swords. Fu Huairan also reached out and grabbed Song Baoxin's black-faced servant, Asang. He extended his barbed tongue and licked her face. He grinned and said, "You look quite black. Could it be that you have the bloodline of the divine bat? Master, save me." Asang was so scared that he screamed and peed in his pants. When Song Baoxin heard this, he turned his head to take a look. He could not help but widen his eyes as tears of blood rolled down his cheeks. Asang. This woman had followed him for many years. She was a baby that he had picked up from a pile of corpses when he was just a few years old. Although they were called master and servant, they were actually a couple. At this moment, his heart was filled with regret. Kong Teichu was too strong. He actually turned defeat into victory and suppressed the cultivators of the ruins of immortality. If he had known this would happen, he would not have gotten involved in this matter. Now he had suffered a double loss. Although he was terrified of Fu Huairan, he rushed forward fearlessly. He swung his long sword and slashed at Fu Huairan's arm with a cold light. Clang! There was a sound like metal colliding with stone. There were sparks, but there was not even the slightest white mark left on Fu Huairan's arm. Is this the power of love? Humans are really interesting creatures. Looking at the horrified Song Baoxin, Fu Huairan was so excited that his hand trembled. Asang's body directly exploded. Blood and organs splattered everywhere. Her broken limbs fell to the ground and dyed the sky red. Demon, I'm going to kill you. Song Baoxin was so angry that he almost went crazy. He slashed at Fu Huairan again and again, displaying all the cultivation of a half-step nascent soul. Fu Huairan showed some irritation. He waved his hand casually and slapped Song Baoxin into a flat surface, as if he was swatting a fly. Blood, organs, and bones formed a thin flat surface with a radius of dozens of meters. Cheng Aojuan, Su Chongqing and the other talents of the academy, even if they had been on the God of War list and enjoyed countless glory and attention, died in this cruel battle. This was a bloody scene, extremely shocking, bloody and cruel. The hundreds of thousands of cultivators present were in chaos. They flowed in all directions like tides, covering 100 miles. As far as the eye could see, there were people everywhere. They died very quickly. Broken bones flew everywhere and bodies fell like rain. Blood bloomed in the air like black dahlias. It could be said that the cultivators were like tigers in a flock of sheep, carrying out a massacre and crushing on a large scale. Wherever the chariot passed, nothing was left alive. Wherever the long sword went, there were no corpses left. Take this. In the midst of his arrogant laughter, Tu Fei threw out more than 10 large explosive array discs in a blink of an eye. One array disc could turn an area 10 miles wide into powder. It was as powerful as an attack from a peak-stage soul formation cultivator, which was invincible in this world. Immediately, the crystal warships of the cultivators of the ruins of deity were torn into pieces like paper. Flames of different colors swept across the sky, and the cultivators inside were immediately turned into ashes. The sect master of the Tianmong Grotto Heaven staggered and was covered in blood. He was surrounded by Niu Duotian and Yun Zhongzi and was severely injured. Get out of the way. If I attack with all my might, you might not be able to resist. Why do you have to fight to the death? The sect master of the Tianmong Grotto Heaven shouted and threatened. That was not an exaggeration. After all, he was a soul formation cultivator. If he exploded, he could severely injure Niu Duotian and Yin Zhongzi. Zhao, look! Suddenly he heard an immortal will. The sect master of the Tianmong Grotto Heaven turned around and saw it. Jiang Tian was holding Zhao Shanha's nascent soul, as if it were a doll that could be crushed at any time. Let him go. We can negotiate. The sect master of the Tianmong Grotto Heaven said with a trembling voice while blocking the attacks of Niu Duotian and Yun Zhongzi. Jiang Tian smiled and didn't say anything. He was playing with Zhao Shanha's nascent soul, as if it were made of clay. The latter was almost destroyed and was screaming and begging for mercy. All of a sudden, Yun Zhongzi took advantage of the panicked state of the Tianmong Grotto Heaven's sect master to use the Red Crown Crane Divine Sword. It pierced through the Tianmong Grotto Heaven's sect master's divine treasure at an unimaginable angle and killed him. I've been hit. The remaining divine soul of the sect master of the Tianmong Grotto Heaven was filled with despair and sorrow. Ah, you've lived for thousands of years, but your mind is still so weak. You're like a 3-year-old child. Don't you know that you'll both die if you're distracted by your son? Jiang Tian said as he crushed Zhao Shanha's nascent soul with one hand without any emotion in his eyes. Then the golden lake on his forehead rippled, and the soul-swallowing divine will swept out and crushed the divine soul of the sect master of the Tianmong Grotto Heaven. In the meantime, the group of heroes and assassins killed another soul formation cultivator. Seeing this, Jiang Tian's eyes glittered and he said softly, "All right, I wanted to give you a chance to train, but it's about time. Leave the rest of the soul formation cultivators to me. Go and kill the nascent soul cultivators to improve your power." He flew across 100 miles and came above the sect master of the 10,000 soul grotto heaven, and stomped his foot. The sect master of the 10,000 souls grotto heaven had a drastic change in expression. He waved the 10,000 souls myriad banner in his hand. Tens of thousands of souls roared in unison, shaking the heavens and the earth. They formed a huge skull and swept out, attacking Jiang Tian. That was the divine soul of 10,000 nascent soul cultivators that the grotto heaven had collected over 10,000 years. After being refined with a secret technique, its soul energy was very powerful and could make people lose their souls and turn them into soul energy in the soul banner. Jiang Tian didn't even dodge or use the soul-swallowing divine soul. He just continued to stomp his foot. Crack. The corporeal body of the sect master of the 10,000 soul grotto heaven was stomped into a meat patty by Jiang Tian. Blood that was filled with eerie ghost chi swept across the sky. Every drop of blood that landed on the ground was like poison, causing the vitality of the surrounding 1 mile to wither and turn into a land of death. But this time, Jiang Tian didn't waste any of it. Once the primordial Taotai returning spirit law was unleashed, a whirlpool spun and swallowed the sect master of the 10,000 soul grotto heaven's scattered chi, blood, spirit, and even the incomplete god. They became Jiang Tian's resources. Jiang Tian felt a few waves of complicated energy surging out of the spirit embryo and filling his limbs and bones. Jiang Tian's primal chaos creation chant was already very powerful. It was an emperor's throne technique, and it was practically made for the primal chaos divine physique. Once the primal chaos divine physique was formed, its power increased even more. Now he could even refine a star, let alone a mere god. Unfortunately, he was already very powerful, and this god only increased his cultivation by half a level. He was still a distance away from the second level of the nascent soul realm. He refined the sect master of the 10,000 soul grotto heaven into his resources. At the same time, the soul formation cultivators, sect masters and family masters who were fighting with the bandits and assassins almost went crazy after seeing this. They trembled and begged Jiang Tian, "Please don't do this. Your Majesty, please spare my life. This old man is willing to lead the families to abandon the darkness and join the light. Your Majesty, our sect didn't participate in the battle against the bandits. Your Majesty, please understand. We're willing to fight against the Ruins Emperor. The Ruins Emperor's tyranny is unpopular. In fact, I've wanted to rebel for a long time." Many experts spoke. Some even rubbed their palms and cursed at the empire of the Ruins of Immortality. as if they were facing the enemy who had killed their father. Unfortunately, it's too late. Jiang Tian's face was as cold as iron. He didn't have any intention of stopping. It was certainly good to have a few more soul formation cultivators following him, but that was an external force after all. How could the power of others compare to his own cultivation? If he could kill and refine all the soul formation cultivators today, he would have a chance to reach the second level of the nascent soul realm, or even higher. Then he would have a higher chance of winning the battle against the three giants and the old ruins emperor. How could he miss this opportunity? Chapter 16:10. Bang! Jiang Tian stepped in the air and the air collapsed. He had already flashed out like a bolt of lightning. His leg was like a heavenly blade, breaking a soul formation ancestral patriarch's waist. His divine treasures collapsed and his divine blood spilled out, shining like gems. That was the master of a family, a soul formation cultivator, who had been famous for thousands of years. His name was Divine Lord Lianhua. He had once dominated an era, and was invincible. His name had shocked the world for thousands of years and nobody dared to provoke or anger him. However, at that moment, it was smashed apart by a single kick from Jiang Tian. Its body that was comparable to precious metal, was easily shattered like a fragile piece of porcelain. Arr! His god screamed and flashed with light. Many Dharma laws and fragments of the Grand Tao floated, but he still ran for his life. Whoosh! Whoosh! The Taotai returning primordial spirit was activated again, swallowing and destroying the god. His miserable screams shook the world. Under the crazy refinement, Jiang Tian's true essence increased by another 5%. Another powerful Divine Lord Lianhua, had died. Run! This guy is so terrifying. The remaining soul formation cultivators of the ruins of deity were almost crazy when they saw a fiend god. They just wanted to leave this dangerous place. But they couldn't do as they wished. They were entangled by the 7 bandits and couldn't get away. After all, the 7 bandits were about the same level as them. Jiang Tian rushed over and fought with those soul formation cultivators. He didn't use any Dharma power except for the swallowing part. He destroyed the enemies with his strong body. This was shocking. All the cultivators of the ruins of deity were dumbfounded. Once a cultivator reached the soul formation level, he would become a god in the human world. The difference between the nascent soul level and the soul formation level wasn't just the level, but the level of life. It was the difference between a mortal and a deity. Soul formation overlords were no longer mortals, nor were they essence chi beings. They had bodies of Dharma laws that wouldn't decay for thousands of years. They were called divine bodies, which were extremely tough and powerful. Not even 100 nuclear bombs could seriously injure a real soul formation cultivator. Those soul formation cultivators all controlled Dharma laws, and touched the Grand Tao. They cast Dharma laws and tried to kill and stop Jiang Tian. But it was useless. These extremely dangerous and tough laws and domains that could topple mountains and overturn seas were easily torn apart like spider webs by Jiang Tian's rampage. Jiang Tian was completely capable of engaging in close combat, and killing with his bare hands. Clang! Clang! As their fists and legs collided, the sound they emitted was like a resounding bell. And the sound waves shook the world while the waves of air surged and spread towards the surroundings. With a single glance, sound waves surged in the heavens and the earth, causing space to shake and warp, and the scenery was miserable and blurry. Jiang Tian's punches and kicks all contained a kind of aura that could swallow mountains and rivers, and destroy the boundless universe. It made people's hearts tremble, and they couldn't help but want to kowtow. Bang bang bang. The power and strength of Jiang Tian's chaotic divine body was truly unleashed. He used his fists to smash their bodies of laws and tough divine bodies into pieces. Their arms, legs, and skulls, which were shining with sparkling light, floated in the air, giving people a tragic and magnificent feeling. Miserable shrill cries, howls of despair, and roars of rage rose and fell, and they shook the world and shook the hearts of all. All kinds of blood energy filled the sky like red clouds. The remaining soul energy and divine souls of the fallen soul formation cultivators interfered with reality, as if ghosts were crying and wolves were howling. If the nascent soul cultivators were in that battlefield, their divine souls would have been destroyed. That was the first battle Jiang Tian had fought after he formed the Supreme Chaotic Nine Orifices Divine Infant. Jiang Tian's divine body was also used to train himself. Jiang Tian fought like a cicada in winter. But after he punched, the earth shook, the wind blew and the space was torn apart. The head of a half-soul formation cultivator exploded, and he died right away. Jiang Tian's eyes were cold, and he didn't show any mercy. He waved his fingers and the space in a 100-mile radius was split open by pure energy. Countless crystal battleships exploded, and the nascent soul cultivators on them were torn in half. Jiang Tian stepped in the air, and arrived in front of another soul formation grand cultivator. He grabbed his legs and opened his hands. Everyone saw that in shock. The body of that peerless grand cultivator, known as Divine Lord Leisheng, was torn in half by Jiang Tian. The two legs and broken limbs were held in Jiang Tian's hands. Blood scattered outwards, and a string of blood produced 1,000 zhang long green lightning dragon, blasting the void apart. An expanse of vital energy produced 10,000 zhang long lead clouds, covering the sky and covering the earth. That was apparently a soul formation grand cultivator, who had mastered the wind and thunder dharma laws. The remaining energy after his death was earth-shattering and caused the grand Tao to resonate, but he was still torn apart by Jiang Tian easily. At the moment, Jiang Tian was like a god in the divine world. His divine body was indestructible, and his fighting power was unparalleled. He was invincible, which made people feel terrified. His divine body didn't emit any light. He looked ordinary. However, his long robe fluttered in the wind and his thick black hair fluttered like a waterfall. His eyes were as bright as lightning, which made people's hearts tremble. Jiang Tian didn't let those soul formation grand cultivators go to waste. Their bodies, divine bodies and dharma power, were all swallowed by the Taotai divine law. Their incomparably vast and surging qi and blood became the supreme resources for Jiang Tian's cultivation. Under the circulation of the primal chaos creation art, Jiang Tian's cultivation base quickly broke through to the first level of the nascent soul realm, and even headed straight for the second level. In the end, the sect masters of the 5 grotto heavens, the elders, the grand elders and the masters of the families, the 18 soul formation cultivators who had just attacked, were all killed and swallowed by Jiang Tian. None of them escaped. The senior members of the 5 grotto heavens were all dead. Clatter, clatter, clatter. Only Divine Lord Sun Xiao and Xian Nu, who had surrendered to Jiang Tian in the Water Moon Grotto Heaven, were left. They were spared by Jiang Tian, but their teeth were still chattering. He defeated all the Divine Lords in the ruins of deity alone. Not even the virtuous cultivators in the deity ground, and the heavenly courts could do that. Divine Lord Xian Nu's eyes twitched. He felt lucky that he had chosen to follow Jiang Tian back then. Otherwise he would have definitely died that day. He's the only one with such power in the entire ruins of deity. Divine Lord Sun Xiao also couldn't stay calm. He stared at Jiang Tian with admiration, wishing he could be in his place. If even a supreme divine lord was so terrified, the rest of the cultivators would be even more terrified. All the cultivators were terrified. They didn't even dare to fight back or run away. They withdrew their dharma power and all kinds of dharma artifacts, lowered their battleships and flying swords, and knelt on the ground, calling him, Your Majesty and Heavenly the Arch. The Xiantian mountain range, which used to be magnificent, had almost been removed from the continent of the ruins of deity. The mountains had turned into gullies and the abyss had been filled. It was as if the world had changed in the blink of an eye. There was no one else in the sky where the ocean of energy was boiling. Only Jiang Tian was left. He was in a black outfit, with black hair and black eyes. He stood in the sky and looked down at the world. At this moment, everyone was looking at Jiang Tian with horrified eyes. Their teeth were chattering nonstop. 18 soul formation grand cultivators. A total of 18 peerless Sir Gods had been slaughtered by Jiang Tian, like he was chopping vegetables and melons. The soul formation cultivators of the 5 grotto heavens had all been killed. Ban Shan and Haihezi were the Grand Chancellor of the Academy. They had been taught by the headmaster, and had mastered Dharma laws. However, they were still defeated by Jiang Tian. Besides, all of this had happened after Jiang Tian had killed the Divine Emperor of Fire, and used up his energy. Furthermore, Jiang Tianqi's old black clothes were not stained by a single speck of dust, nor were they damaged in the slightest. His breathing was steady, and his expression was calm. Apparently, he still had energy left. He's so powerful. At this moment, even Ji Yusha, who had never thought highly of Jiang Tian, was completely conquered by Jiang Tian. Her eyes were full of admiration, and she couldn't wait to worship him. The empire of the ruins of deity had been established for 10,000 years, and had a long history. In the long river of history, it wasn't as if there hadn't been a monstrous genius who had dominated a generation, and far surpassed his peers. But that was a battle of the same level. A nascent soul cultivator could defeat a nascent soul cultivator of the same generation. It was difficult to challenge a half-soul formation cultivator. Just like Jiang Tian, he could easily kill a soul formation cultivator with just his nascent soul-level cultivation and his physical body. There had never been such a case in the history of the empire of the ruins of deity. It had never even happened in the era of the ancient heavenly courts. Chapter 16:11. Jiang Tian had killed 18 soul formation grand cultivators on the Xiantian mountain range. When the news spread, the entire ruins of deity and many other worlds were shocked. The ruins of deity. In terms of the dimensions of the universe, it was a cultivation planet 10 times, or even 100 times larger than Earth. It was surrounded by countless spirit chi tides, Dharma laws and Taoist connotation. It was located in the most suitable orbit of Southgate 2, and was rotating slowly. Besides, there were many planets around it, such as Hylon and Barren Desert, which looked extremely vast and vast. At the same time, billions of people on the vast continents in the ruins of deity and many other worlds were in silence. The streets were empty, the clouds in the sky seemed to have stopped, and the breeze seemed to have been frozen. In the shops, restaurants, brothels, mansions of wealthy families, and the heavenly paradises that hung high in the sky, as long as there was a golden light screen, everyone who saw the scene was dumbfounded. They were motionless like clay sculptures, as if their souls had been sucked out. Only a still picture was left. No one had expected that Jiang Tian would actually win the battle. In fact, the battle between Jiang Tian and Divine Emperor Lai Hua had attracted too much attention. It could be said that the ruins of Deity Dynasty had never been as magnificent as that day since it was established 10,000 years ago, which attracted the attention of all the cultivators. After all, Jiang Tian was really powerful. Ever since he entered the Southgate 2 system, he had killed nascent soul cultivators, defeated the 3 golden crows, slaughtered divine emperors and killed the crown prince. He was invincible in the 4 worlds below the Hylon world. In the end, he teamed up with the 7 bandits and caused a huge stir in the ruins of deity. He started a massacre right under the nose of the emperor of the ruins. In the end, Divine Emperor Lai Hua, the 2 chancellors of the academy and the 6 grotto heavens joined forces to kill Jiang Tian on the Xiantian mountain range. He was so unscrupulous and reckless. He could be said to be the most powerful bandit since the establishment of the ruins of deity, a peerless hero and a world-destroying fiend. Even the overlords of the bandits and assassins, who claimed to be the descendants of the ancient heavenly courts, had never caused such a scene. However, they could not help but admit that Jiang Tian was the strongest genius in the history of the ruins of immortality. Stepping into the nascent soul realm with less than 50 years of lifespan was already a heaven-shattering achievement. It was as rare as phoenix feathers and Qilin horns. More importantly, Jiang Tian was only at the nascent soul level, but he had the power to kill half-soul formation cultivators, and even soul formation cultivators. Once he entered the nascent soul level, he could even kill soul formation cultivators. That was unbelievable and nobody could accept it. Therefore, the battle between Jiang Tian and the Inferno Godly Emperor attracted the attention of countless people in the ruins of immortality. No matter what, Kong Teichu is no match for the Inferno Godly Emperor. They're just ants born on a remote planet. Just like a pig or a dog. How can you be compared to the dignified Inferno Godly Emperor? Previously, when he killed Divine Emperor Hanshi, it doesn't mean anything. He must have used some despicable means to plot against me. He definitely isn't strong or has a deep cultivation base. That's right. Otherwise, why would Jiang Taichu not dare to show himself, and act like a coward when the army of the Ruins of Immortality was beating up the bandits like dogs during this period of time. A lot of cultivators were discussing, from the barren desert world to the flourishing Tianmong Grotto heaven, from the desolate Xianqiu ancient city to the vast and magnificent divine city of the Ruins of Immortality. All the cultivators of the Ruins of Immortality were not optimistic about Jiang Tian. They were full of mockery and disdain. The empire of the Ruins of Immortality was built by invaders. 10,000 years ago, when the deity ground and many other planets entered the orbit of the South Gate 2 stars, the cultivators of the South Gate 1 star quickly invaded and occupied this cultivation planet when the wanderers of the deity ground entered the age of Tao damage. In the long history, they expelled the wanderers of the deity ground to low-level worlds. On the one hand, they falsified and burned historical books, promoted enslavement education, and used the academy selection system to soften and confuse the descendants of the indigenous people. On the other hand, they built countless chi-attracting arrays to secretly absorb the spirit chi of many worlds into the planet of the Ruins of Immortality. By then, the indigenous people had been reduced to the lowest level of slaves. Whether it was cultivation arts, cultivation resources, strength, or the number of people, they couldn't compare with the invaders. The key was that the descendants of the wanderers had long forgotten the truth of the history of the ancient heavenly courts, and had forgotten to resist. They regarded the invaders as their masters, the executioners who slaughtered them as the arbiters of fate, and the Ruins of Immortality, which belonged to them, as the deity realm hanging high in the sky, an unreachable place that needed to be worshipped. In the eyes of the cultivators of the Ruins of Immortality, they despised the low-level worlds and the people there. It was like how humans looked at the nests of ants and the nests of rats. They thought that it was just a barbarian land, a remote place full of low-level creatures, dirty and lowly, who were not even qualified to be cultivation furnaces. They certainly didn't think that Jiang Tian would be able to challenge Divine Emperor Lai Hua. However, when they saw Jiang Tian kill Divine Emperor Lai Hua and 18 Soul Formation Grand Cultivators with their own eyes, they were shocked. Everyone was shocked. Everyone felt as if they had been hit by a stick, and their minds went blank. Everyone thought that even if Jiang Tian had cultivated in seclusion and made a breakthrough, he had only just entered the nascent soul level. He was still far from the soul formation level, especially a peerless emperor like Divine Emperor Lai Hua. He might be able to resist a dozen attacks, but it definitely wouldn't last long. Besides, the two Grand Chancellors of the Academy and the Sect Masters of the Grotto Heavens and Soul Formation Grand Cultivators were there. It was like a group of boxers who had won a gold belt forming a super luxurious lineup to fight a 3-year-old child together. It was as easy as turning their hands. Nobody had thought that it would end like this. Divine Emperor Lai Hua, a peerless divine emperor and the direct disciple of the old Ruins Emperor, had been killed by Jiang Tian with ease. Even the two Grand Chancellors of the Academy and the Sect Masters of the Grotto Heavens were crushed by Jiang Tian's body, as if he were cutting vegetables. That meant that the 6 Grotto Heavens only existed in name. The 6 pillars above the Ruins of Deity were broken at the same time. All the forces outside of the Ruins of Deity collapsed immediately. Besides, Jiang Tian didn't use any tricks or secret arts or Dao artifacts. He simply pushed forward with his body and punched and kicked many soul formation cultivators like a bulldozer crushing eggs. When they came back to themselves, countless cultivators and mortals in the Ruins of Deity were enraged, furious and crying. Divine Emperor Lai Hua is a peerless expert with countless divine powers and dharma laws. He's like a true god descending to the mortal world. How could he die? Some cultivators looked pale and sad, as if the sky had collapsed and their fathers had died. Divine Emperor Lai Hua, how could you leave us? What should we do? Countless people in the Ruins of Deity wailed and cried. Blood and tears rolled down their chests. They were in so much pain that they wanted to die. Divine Emperor Lai Hua was indeed a wise lord. The third emperor of the Ruins of Deity, the Empress of the Ruins of Deity, once led the 9 troops on an expedition to the dimensional worlds to quell the chaos caused by the 7 major bandits. He established many agencies in the inferior worlds and created the special envoy system. He once created the war god role of the Ruins of Deity, established the academy and a selection system to select talents from the inferior worlds. This included erasing the history of the celestial land, the ancient heavenly court, burning ancient texts and killing those who spread them. He also made some contributions, one after another. It could be said that to the people of the ruins of immortality, the Inferno godly emperor was a wise ruler. His achievements were brilliant and incomparably glorious. For them, the feeling of the sky collapsing wasn't an exaggeration, it was real. Soul formation grand cultivators intercepted countless Dharma laws of the world and condensed them into fragments of the grand Tao, turning them into gods in their bodies. They had to go through tribulation when they reached the nascent soul level, or the soul formation level. Cultivators and mortals who stole the laws of heaven in this world would naturally be killed and devoured by the world. However, once one succeeded in transcending the tribulation and obtained a position as a result, one would be recognized by the heavens and earth. When they turned into gods in the human world, the Dharma laws and grand Tao inside them could resonate with the world, as if they were the children of the world. And once they died, the world would be sad, angry and shocked, as if it had lost its beloved children. The sky wailed, the wind howled and the rain fell and thunder rumbled. The other creatures also felt the will of the world. They were depressed, angry, sad and confused, as if they had nothing to rely on. Many grotto heavens and the 100 Moon Academy were also gloomy. Ban Shan and the black and white child have left us forever. On the mountain behind the academy, in a quiet place, Jade Lotus Fairy, Yan Hua, Xian Hu and the other chancellors were looking at the golden light curtain with sadness and pain. Kong Teichu's men attacked the soldiers of the academy. Isn't he bullying the weak? Using your strength to bully the weak, despicable and shameless. Does he really think that he's the most reasonable just because he's the most powerful? Many of the academy's disciples were enraged and shouted loudly. They wanted nothing more than to fight Jiang Tian for 300 rounds and tear him into pieces. Only by burning his bones and scattering his ashes would they be able to vent their anger. The headmaster has appeared. At this time, someone suddenly exclaimed as he stared at the golden light screen in disbelief. Then, countless people in front of the light curtain saw a tall, strong and dignified figure appear on the messy Xiantian mountain range. It was an old man. The old man was wearing an old green robe, but it didn't have a speck of dust on it, giving people a sense of cleanliness. His face was thin and simple, but there was a hint of dignity in his kind temperament. It was the headmaster. Chapter 16:12. When the headmaster appeared, the entire ruins of immortality quieted down. Deep reverence and gratitude appeared on the faces of hundreds of millions of people. They were like devout believers who had seen a true God. Greetings, headmaster. A moment later, everyone kowtowed with their foreheads on the ground. Their faces were full of reverence. If the headmaster had not been born, the ruins of immortality would have been like a long night. The headmaster was one of the 3 giants in the ruins of immortality. He had once assisted the old ruins emperor in defeating the natives of the deity ground, establishing the empire of the ruins of immortality, building the 100 Moon Academy, and creating the Dian Taoist law. Countless soul formation and nascent soul grand cultivators in the ruins of immortality had received his guidance. His cultivation methods were unparalleled, and his divine powers were unpredictable. He had dominated the ruins of immortality for 10,000 years, and was admired by countless people. In the hearts of the people, his status was very high, just like the Buddha and the true God. It was not because the headmaster could oppress people with his power, but because the dead people respected him from the bottom of their hearts. The headmaster came out of the mountain. He was simple and unadorned, pure and natural. He was not surrounded by rays of light or auspicious colors, nor was he boiling or roaring. He did not oppress people with his power. He simply stood there, floating in the air, but it was as if this was how it should be, as if it was the natural order of things. It showed that his control over the great Tao of this world had reached the point of perfection. It was as if he was a part of the great Tao. His face was not very old, and there were only a few wrinkles. His face was lean and handsome, but his eyes were extremely old, with traces of the passage of time. It was as if all the vicissitudes of life were contained in them. They were incomparably deep and wise. The headmaster has finally come out of the mountain. Is he going to fight Kong Taechu himself? Even if Kong Taechu is the reincarnation of a true immortal, or the resurrection of the old devil, he is definitely no match for the headmaster. God bless the ruins of immortality. Fortunately, we have the headmaster. Many cultivators were shocked and could not keep calm. This was one of the last trump cards of the ruins of immortality. The headmaster was like a pillar supporting the sky. He was one of the most respected and powerful beings in the ruins of immortality. He stood at the top of the ruins of immortality, and was called the guardian of the ruins of immortality. He was far more powerful than the divine emperor of fire, and the sect masters of the grotto heavens. In fact, many emperors and sect masters of grotto heavens were proud of being taught by the headmaster. Therefore, the cultivators of the ruins of immortality basically believed that Jiang Tian was no match for the headmaster. As expected of the sage that appears once every 10,000 years in the ruins of immortality. Jiang Tian looked at the headmaster. His pupils shrank and his eyes narrowed. No matter how strong his divine sense was and how profound his cultivation method was, he still felt like he was looking up at a high mountain when he faced the headmaster. It was as if he was facing an abyss that was hard to shake and hard to see. After all, he was an experienced divinity transformation stage cultivator with 10,000 years of experience. He had been through the battle between the South Gate and the deity ground, and had lived for more than 10,000 years. Although he was not as strong and experienced as Jiang Tian, who had lived 2 lives, he was still an unparalleled grand cultivator, who dominated a star system. But Jiang Tian was still relaxed. Although it was not easy to shake, it was not impossible to shake it. In Jiang Tian's eyes, the headmaster was just harder to kill. I'm a teacher of the 100 Moons Academy, a poor and pedantic scholar. Greetings, fellow Taoist. To everyone's surprise, when the headmaster saw Jiang Tian, he was not angry at all. Instead, he stood 3 miles away and bowed to him respectfully. Be careful, Senior Taichu. Your Majesty, this man is powerful. We have to be careful. This old bastard must be up to no good. The warriors and assassins were vigilant, nervous and frightened. Many Dharma arts, divine powers, Dharma treasures and Taoist artifacts were ready to be used, as if they had seen a peerless god of death. I'm Kong Taechu, an itinerant cultivator from another planet. Nice to meet you, headmaster. Jiang Tian only smiled faintly and returned the greeting unhurriedly. The old man once read in the ancient books left by the heavenly courts of the previous dynasty, that some cultivators with special bloodlines in the deity ground were like the children of God. Once they entered the nascent soul level, they would be able to form a supreme Dharma law and kill soul formation grand cultivators. The old man used to think it was a fallacy, but after seeing it today, he finally realized that it was true. Did you get many inheritances from the heavenly courts in the solar system? The headmaster glanced at the messy Xiantian mountain range, and took a few deep looks at Jiang Tian. He sighed with emotion. His hair fluttered slightly in the wind, and his old green robe stretched out like a flag. He gave off a feeling of being at ease, but also as steady as Mount Tai. What does a mere ancient heavenly court amount to? Headmaster, even though you're talented and powerful, you're still confined to a small place like the South Gate Galaxy. How would you know the vastness of the universe and the star ocean? Jiang Tian smiled and said calmly, there are a lot of cultivation arts that are more powerful than the Dharma arts in the deity ground and the cultivation arts in the ruins of deities. Unfortunately, you don't know. The reason why his cultivation speed was so fast and he had formed the chaotic divine body in this life was because of the heavenly treasures, deity ingredients and divine materials left by the ancient sages. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to make bricks without straws. But when it came to cultivation arts and cultivation arts, Jiang Tian mostly came from the central galaxy, or even the deity realm and the divine realm. He had also mastered them himself. My friend, can you tell me where you're from? Upon hearing this, the headmaster's body trembled slightly. His expression was extremely solemn. He revealed a thoughtful and curious look and asked thoughtfully. In fact, the old man used to study you for a long time. There were many theories about your background. Some said you were blessed, some said you were a deity, and some even said you were the reincarnation of the Shang Emperor and the Ao Emperor. But the more the old man researched, the more he felt something was wrong. The idea of reincarnation is illusory. Besides, even the AO Emperor and the others were suppressed by the changes of the Grand Tao back then, and couldn't use the Dharma arts in the deity ground. But you've successfully improved the inheritances of the Great Ko dynasty. I don't believe in the theory of being a deity and being blessed either. Strength can be inherited quickly, but temperament, strategy and will can't be. Ever since I started the battle with you in the ruins of deity, I felt like I was facing a peerless god of war who had lived for tens of thousands of years. His mind was as firm as a rock. His mind was as deep as the ocean, and he was resolute, as if he had been through countless battles. I couldn't see the slightest bit of panic or hesitation in your eyes and actions, as if everything in the world was within your expectations, and you could make the most rational and optimal choice in an instant. After hearing what you said today, I'm even more convinced that you're not the reincarnation of a grand cultivator. Then he looked at Jiang Tian with a questioning look. Jiang Tian smiled and said, I'm indeed the reincarnation of a grand cultivator. You're really the AO Emperor, or Zhongli. How is that possible? Many people were shocked. Impossible. The AO Emperor was only half a step away from the void return level, but he was suppressed by the changes of the Grand Tao in the world. You, on the other hand, will be much more powerful than the void return level in the future. Even the headmaster could not believe it. His eyes were filled with astonishment. Suddenly, he seemed to understand something and said softly, Could it be that you are from the legendary Central Galaxy? He had participated in the operation to kill the AO Emperor's descendants, but apparently Jiang Tian was much more powerful than the AO Emperor at the moment. You really do know about the Central Galaxy. Jiang Tian looked at the teacher thoughtfully. Half a step away from the void return level? Void return level? That's nothing. Jiang Tian snickered and looked up at the sky. His deep eyes seemed to be able to see through the deity ground, the arrays and the billions of planes. He seemed to be able to see the supreme world enveloped in deity light that suppressed everything. He said leisurely, What's the matter with you? In my previous life, I went to the deity realm and killed tens of thousands of deities. I was called the deity emperor and entered the divine realm. I was on par with the heavenly masters and Buddha and almost created a world that belonged to me. He had used his divine sense to transmit these words. Only the headmaster could hear him, so no one else could hear him. What? Is there really a deity realm in this world where one can become a deity? And a real entity? The teacher was extremely shocked. His Dharma power and divine powers were supreme in the ruins of deity. He seemed to be omniscient and omnipotent, full of wisdom and philosophy. But at this moment, he was like an ignorant child in front of Jiang Tian, with ignorance and desire. Some cultivators of the South Gate had entered the Central Galaxy with the Universe Teleport Array, but they were still at the edge of the Central Galaxy. The information that these cultivators sent back was only a few words, and the legends of the immortal world were not detailed. In the history of the Southgate Galaxy, being able to reach the soul formation level was the limit. Void return, Tao reunion, perfected immortal and tribulation transcendence to the deity realm were just legends. No cultivator in history had ever done it. Even reaching the Central Galaxy was a luxury. Of course there are deities. Jiang Tian smiled and said, Let's not talk about the deities who have ascended to the deity realm. Tao reunion perfected immortals can live for 3,000 years as spring and autumn. 10,000 years is just a spring and autumn. They can live for 1,000,000 years and swallow the sun, shatter planets with a snap of their fingers and travel freely in the universe, using galaxies as baths and the sun and moon as pillows. They can be called deities. As for the deities in the deity realm, they can live as long as the sky even if the universe collapses and worlds are destroyed. The teacher was dumbfounded, as if he were listening to a book from heaven. He had never thought that he would be so insignificant. In the ruins of deity, he was a saint that appeared once in 10,000 years, one of the three most powerful beings and a teacher and friend of the emperor of the ruins of deity. In this world, he was second only to one person and above billions of people. And yet, he had never thought that the world would be so vast. It was an extremely vast world that was beyond his knowledge. Jiang Tian looked at the dumbfounded teacher with a hint of viciousness in his eyes. He smiled and said, You and I have introduced ourselves. Can we fight now? As soon as these words came out, everyone was shocked. The entire ruins of deity was shocked. Kang Taechu was really domineering. He dared to challenge the teacher. Chapter 16:13. However, the master quickly became serious. He cupped his hands again and said solemnly, "Brother Taichu, I didn't mean to offend you, senior. I'm here to negotiate." To show his sincerity and respect, he had already used the honorific brother, and was very humble. But considering Jiang Tian's long lifespan in his previous life, Jiang Tian could afford to be called brother. Negotiate? Jiang Tian smiled calmly and said, "That's right. I've talked to Chancellor Yan Hua and Prince Chunyu, who I killed, about the terms of the negotiation. Either you go back to your South Gate 1 star. Otherwise I'll kill all of you, not leaving even a chicken or dog alive. This world should belong to the wanderers of the deity ground. Brother Taichu, if we can return to the South Gate 1 star, why do we have to go on an expedition to this world?" The headmaster shook his head as if he had aged a few hundred years in an instant. He smiled bitterly and said with bitterness and sorrow, "In fact, the planet of life on the South Gate 1 star was destroyed 8,000 years ago. We're the real wanderers." What? Jiang Tian was stunned. In fact, he regarded the Ruins Emperor as an enemy, but he also knew that the Ruins Emperor had a powerful backer, which was the South Gate 1 star. But he had never thought that the South Gate 1 star had already become a land of death. "We fought against the heavenly courts of the previous dynasty, and invaded the ruins of deity. We had no choice, because the South Gate 1 star was facing a world-ending disaster. And now, the apocalypse had already spread to the Southern Gate 2 stars. The ruins of deity, Hailan Desert, fertile land and dozens of other worlds will be destroyed in 100 years. Or even shorter." The master didn't speak with his immortal will, he spoke with his mouth. His words resounded throughout the ruins of deity, and even spread to the second and third dimensions through the Dharma artifacts. At that moment, the entire world of the ruins of deity was deeply shocked. What? The Southgate galaxy will be destroyed in 100 years? Or even shorter? Countless cultivators felt their hearts skip a beat. Some were sad, some were confused, some were shocked, and some couldn't believe it. They all looked at the Xiantian mountain range, the light screen, and Jiang Tian on the light screen. Even the Great Ko's group of heroes were stunned. In fact, the rumor that the ruins of immortality was facing the end of the world had always been circulating, but it had never been publicly acknowledged by the Empire of the Ruins of Immortality. The Southgate star system doesn't actually have 2 stars, but a third star. This star was called the third star, or the companion star. It's just that the third star is very far away from the first and second stars. Its volume is only 1/10 or even 1/100th of the size of the first and second stars. It's similar to the sun in your world. Furthermore, it's in a relatively stable and balanced structure with the first and second stars. Most of the time, the third star's gravitational force and the heat it gives can be ignored. The headmaster said in a deep voice, "We used to live on the wood spirit star around the Southgate 1 star. It was a world where spiritual chi was as abundant as a waterfall, heavenly materials and earthly treasures were as abundant as an ocean, a prosperous population, and a thriving cultivation civilization. It was not inferior to the deity ground at all. That used to be our hometown." He waved his hand casually and withdrew a brand image magic artifact that was modeled with copper rust and had extremely profound and ancient markings on it. It seemed as if it came from the last era. The branded Dharma artifact left the headmaster's palm lightly. It spun and emitted thousands of rays of light, forming a vivid picture. It looked very vivid and vivid. This is the legendary wood spirit star. It's 100 times more prosperous than the ruins of immortality. I heard that this is our ancestral land, but nobody talks about it anymore. It seems to have become a taboo. I heard that the wood spirit star has disappeared. It disappeared into thin air? How is that possible? Where did it go? That's a planet with life. Everyone was shocked. Even though it was very quiet on the scene, and in front of the light screens, the cultivators were discussing and communicating with their immortal will. Looking down from the sky, the wood spirit star was a cultivation planet several times larger than the ruins of immortality. It was vast and boundless, shrouded in endless light and auspicious chi. The spirit meridians were like lofty mountains and lofty ridges, as vigorous as dragons lying across the earth. All kinds of spirit springs flowed, and silver waterfalls fell down 30,000 feet, shaking the sky. All kinds of spirit beasts and spirit medicines grew on the mountains, shining with divine light. Golden-winged giant rocks that were thousands of feet long soared into the sky. Every time they rose and fell, they would grab demonic beasts that were 2 or 3 times larger than themselves. Their cries shook the sky. Cities big and small were scattered all over the place, enveloped in dazzling divine arrays that could withstand the attacks of soul formation stage cultivators. The buildings were streamlined, as if they were immortal palaces. They were extremely exquisite, and looked like a futuristic world. The cultivators seemed to have the ability to pick the stars and the moon. It was very prosperous. Battleships and flying ships flew across the sky. Judging from the scale and speed, their refining level was much higher than that of the Empire of the Ruins of Immortality. The cultivators present had strong immortal will. They knew that even if the headmaster created the illusion himself, it was still different from the real immortal will. They could tell at a glance that it was real. Of course, with Jiang Tian's immortal will, he could also tell that the picture was real. However, he still remained calm and unmoved. It could be called a cultivation planet, but it was still incomparable to the spirit chi planets and Dharma laws planets Jiang Tian had seen in the central galaxy. Of course, the wood spirit planet was indeed dazzling in a peripheral galaxy like the Milky Way. Yes, where did the wood spirit planet go? The headmaster showed a hint of sadness and said, 30,000 years ago, the cultivators on the wood spirit planet began to detect that the third planet had begun to expand rapidly, and its mass was also increasing. The equilibrium of the 3 planets in the Southgate galaxy was gradually broken. At first, it wasn't obvious. It was just a sudden increase in temperature, a drought, a volcanic eruption, a major earthquake, or the extinction of a species. That was nothing for the cultivators, especially for a cultivation sacred ground, where many soul formation cultivators were born. We could fly in the sky and go underground to save people in danger. We could move mountains and seas and stabilize the earth veins. We could summon the wind and rain and control the weather. We thought we could save our world. But gradually, the situation went out of control. Even though we thought we were the supreme gods in the human world, we were still so tiny and weak in front of the ruthless power of nature. The third planet and the Southgate galaxy gradually moved closer to each other. The third planet was getting closer and closer to our ancestral land, the wood spirit planet. At that time, the wood spirit planet didn't have night and day. There were only 2 suns, one big and one small. The southern gate 3 stars even became bigger and bigger, covering a third of the sky. The weather became incomparably hot, and the beasts, mortals, and all other creatures turned into dried corpses by the thousands. Starving people were everywhere. On the ground, lava flowed, and water vapor evaporated. It was said that the wood spirit planet was twice as large as the deity ground, and had a population of hundreds of billions. But after that, the population was only 1,000th of the original. In 10 years, all the mortals had died. Only about 1 or 200 million cultivators were still alive. In the end, even the spirit chi and essence chi that the cultivators relied on to survive became thinner and thinner. Even golden core cultivators with bodies as tough as copper skin and iron bones would not be able to withstand it. The wood spirit planet fell into despair. Laws were broken and morals were lost. The dynasties, states, alliances, sects and families were all disbanded. Betrayals, killings, degeneration and wars were happening all the time. That era of chaos lasted for about 3,000 years. The wood spirit planet had become hell. A look of deep reverence appeared in his eyes as he sighed and said, 20,000 years ago, a mighty lord appeared on the wood spirit planet. He had the heavenly body and wasn't afraid of the heat. He could resist the earth, fire, wind and thunder, and even nourish himself. He quickly reached the divine transformation realm, and was invincible. He defeated all his enemies and swept through all directions. Finally, under his leadership, a unified and highly centralized wood spirit dynasty appeared. And this heavenly body was known as the Tyrant Emperor. The tyrant emperor didn't want to watch the civilization of the wood spirit planet being destroyed, and his bloodline being cut off. He tried everything to stop the destruction of the third planet. But after 10,000 years of hard work and the sacrifice of countless people, the tyrant emperor couldn't change the trajectory and the expansion of the third planet. So he decided to run away. In this world, nothing was more important than continuing the bloodline and preserving the fire of civilization. The wood spirit planet was certainly a good place. It was hard to leave our homeland, but it was only the last stop for our ancestors to wander. We are all fighting to survive in this world that is like a sea of bitterness, climbing on this long path. The tyrant emperor's suggestion received the support of the entire wood spirit dynasty. The dynasty used all of its resources to build hundreds of millions of space-traveling artifacts of various sizes. Hundreds of millions of cultivators fled to the depths of space, to all the planets that were deemed suitable for life to survive. This plan was called the Fireworks Plan. He pointed at the ancient Dharma artifact from the last era. Yet another shocking scene appeared before their eyes. Chapter 16:14. On the dry and cracked earth, rivers of magma flowed. Heat waves surged into the sky and black smoke rose into the sky. The vegetation had long been reduced to ashes. Not even a blade of grass grew. Many mountains and rocks had cracked. This world was dazzling everywhere. It was the result of two stars very close to each other and emitting extreme light. Interstellar battleships lined up densely in the void. Their launchers pierced the sky like mountains. Numerous humanoid creatures stood on the ground or fought in the air. They could no longer be considered human. Their skin was shriveled, and they were so thin that they were just skin and bones. They were covered in wrinkles, and their blood and water had almost all been used up. They were like dried corpses, and only their eyes still flickered with an unyielding flame. Their faces were solemn and quiet, containing an extremely cold light. They were like an ancient well without ripples. Perhaps there was only a slight ripple. That was the desire for life and the determination to continue their civilization. They stepped into the interstellar battleships silently. They didn't wave goodbye, shed tears, or reluctantly bid farewell. They were so calm that it made people suspect that they were just robots without emotions. The cultivators entered the recuperation cabins and stopped their blood and life. Then, thousands of interstellar battleships shot into the sky and headed for the cold depths of the universe. The battleships possessed formidable power and were extremely fast. They pulled apart the distance between them and the ancient planet. Looking down from the vantage point, the entire wood spirit star was like an explosion of fireworks. Every cultivator and battleship was a spark. A civilized Mars. Because they didn't know which direction and which location in the universe was suitable for habitation. At that time, the Big Dipper system hadn't contacted us. We knew nothing about this vast universe. Therefore, the cultivators of the Tyrant Emperor era used the stupidest and most tragic method, but it was also the only method they could use, the human wave tactic. The headmaster smiled. The so-called fireworks plan was an expedition to every corner of the universe in every direction. We couldn't miss it. According to historical records, this plan was carried out for thousands of years. At least 1 billion cultivators were annihilated in the universe, until the wood spirit planet was swallowed by the third Southgate planet. And what they pursued was nothing but survival and the continuation of their civilization. During this long voyage, all kinds of situations occurred, but without exception, they were all very tragic. According to historical records, the level of refining in the Tyrant Emperor's era was already very high, but it was still not enough to achieve light speed or even sublight speed. Even the Big Dipper star system, which is closer to us, would take tens of thousands of years. This has already surpassed the lifespan of a divine transformation cultivator. Even blood condensation cultivators would find it difficult to achieve this. He released some more images. They were sent back by the cultivators of the wood spirit star, who had gone on an expedition using long-range branding magic tools. Some extremely cruel scenes were displayed in front of everyone. Some cultivators managed to reach the nearest planets. However, those planets were too large and their gravitational fields were too strong. The moment they landed, they were crushed into meat paste by the violent pressure. It could even be said that it was like a layer of blood film covering a radius of several kilometers. There are also those who run out of power crystals and are frozen to death by the cold waves in the starry river. There are also cases where the ships split apart and the cultivators who are exposed to the vacuum explode like fireworks. That's because the aura within their bodies is exuberant, which will cause great pressure to the outside world. There are also cases where they are cut into pieces thinner than paper by the gales and space fragments. Or the coordinates in the starry sky are wrong. The ships run out of power and glide toward the endless deep space. The cultivators know that they can no longer return to their homes behind them. This spaceship is my coffin. This dark, desolate space, where I can never return, is my burial ground. Let me remind you, fellow Taoists, in the process of the expedition to the Sea of Stars, the cultivators who were already on their way kept sending back these images. However, the fireworks project that has been going on for thousands of years did not stop. The teacher said calmly, but when he reached this point, his eyes were slightly red. Crystal tears were swirling in his eyes as if they were about to roll down. The sky gradually darkened. The sun of this place, Alpha Centauri, fell to the other side of the mountain and below the horizon. The blood-red glow gilded the messy Xiantian mountain range. The corpses, the bloodstains, the broken ships, and the war flags that were stuck into the ground. On the other side, the sky had turned dark blue. The bright stars were like the eyes of the ancient cultivators, overlooking this vicissitude world. At some point, the cultivators from the ruins of immortality, who had been forced to kneel and submit to Jiang Tian, stood up. The fear, panic, and shock on their faces had completely disappeared. They seemed to have forgotten that Jiang Tian had just killed the divine emperor of fire and the sect masters of many grotto heavens. They seemed to have forgotten that there was a peerless god of war standing in front of them. A mixture of sadness and pride surged on their faces. It was as if a patient who was about to run out of oil had been injected with a dose of Dolores, which instantly restored their vitality and vigor. Some of the cultivators were agitated and generous. Some of them shed tears. Some of them even had flames of fighting spirit burning in their eyes. The images presented by the teacher moved by Wuxia slightly. Her eyes turned red. It turned out that the cultivators of the wood spirit star, the former invaders, were actually like the ancient sages of the ancient celestial court. They had all faced the crisis of the end of the world and fought arduously for the continuation of their civilization. They had all paid extremely tragic sacrifices. She even felt a little sympathy for the cultivators of the South Gate Galaxy. She looked at Jiang Tian, only to find that Jiang Tian was also listening very attentively. There was even a hint of sympathy in his eyes. But in the end, before we could find a new place to live, the wood spirit star was destroyed. The third planet of the South Gate was too close. The flames of the star shattered the wood spirit star. The gravitational field was too strong. It swallowed the entire wood spirit star. The teacher's voice sounded faintly. It was full of sorrow, like the rustling autumn wind and the falling yellow leaves in the sky. Many people were shocked and felt a surge of sadness in their hearts. He pointed in the air. The image of the Dharma artifact of the ancient times changed again. There was a bright light. Although it was a picture from more than 10,000 years ago, it was still dazzling and extremely bright. It was as if a sun had risen above the Xiantian mountain range and shone over 1,000 miles. At this moment, the ruins of immortality was completely silent. Only the wind could be heard. Whether it was mortals or cultivators, whether it was nobles or officials, whether it was servants or servants, they all looked up at the scene in the sky. They saw it. An extremely bright spot appeared on the surface of the third planet of the South Gate. It was like the door of a furnace. The strong radiation from the depths of the star passed through the hole, penetrating the photosphere, troposphere and chromosphere, and shone directly on the wood spirit star. On the hemisphere exposed to the light spot, the living beings outside were burned in a few seconds. Even the golden cores of cultivators melted in seconds, and the nascent souls were torn to pieces. Then, the material inside the third planet gushed out of the hole, forming a 100,000-mile flame fountain. The temperature of the material was as high as 10 million degrees. Some of it fell back to the surface under the effect of gravity, while some reached the escape speed and shot into space. Looking from the wood spirit star, The third planet seemed to have grown a brilliant fire tree. After about half an hour, the top of the fire tree intersected with the orbit of the planet. After another half an hour, the moving wood spirit star came into contact with the top of the fire tree. Then it moved in the ejected material belt for 2 hours. During this time, the planet was moving inside the star. The ejected material was still tens of thousands of degrees Celsius after being cooled by space. When the wood spirit star moved out of the ejected material belt, it was already a celestial body emitting a dark red light. Its surface was melted and a sea of magma covered everything. There was a white trail behind the wood spirit star, which was the evaporation of water vapor. After 10,000 years of light and 2 hours of moving inside the star, it could be said that the star was completely dehydrated. Then, the trail was blown away by the solar wind, and the planet turned into a comet with long white hair. At this time, there was no life on the surface of the planet. It was destroyed, but the fuse of disaster had just been ignited. The ejected material belt created a huge resistance to the wood spirit star. After the planet passed through it, its speed decreased, and its orbit dropped a little. The fire tree was like the claws of the sun, pulling the wood spirit star down again and again. After passing through the ejected material belt about 10 times, the wood spirit star would fall to the surface of the sun and be completely devoured, turning into stellar material and becoming part of the third planet. Chapter 16:15. Many people were silent, but tears were rolling down their cheeks. How many of them survived? A cultivator asked in a low voice. The explosion of the third planet destroyed everything in the Southgate 1 planet. Even the Overlord was turned into a rain of light and shattered in the sky. The crystal warships and space cities that were escaping from the wood spirit planet were all destroyed. Only a few of them managed to escape. They were behind another planet, and that planet was used as a cover when the third planet exploded. Only 30,000 people survived, less than 1 in 100,000. The master's voice was very soft. A sad and miserable atmosphere enveloped the entire place. Everyone felt extremely miserable. The wood spirit planet was their home planet, their ancestral land. It used to be prosperous and grand. It was said that there were 1,000 soul formation cultivators, and some even had the chance to enter the void return level. That was a golden age. Heroes rose together, races stood in great numbers, and all kinds of talents came out. They were like stars in the sky, shining brightly and illuminating the ages. And yet it ended in such a way. There were so many living creatures and talents on the wood spirit planet. They struggled for 10,000 years, but they still couldn't escape the fate of their home planet being devoured by a star. How sad and miserable that was. A civilization with a history of 1,000,000 years was turned into ashes and rain of light in 8 hours. Everything ceased to exist. In front of such a magnificent force of nature, the rise and fall of countries, hatred, death, war, peace, killing, celebration, sadness, anger, desperation, joy, countless scenes, and the thoughts of countless people were not worth mentioning. They could only be turned into dust ruthlessly. The great Tao was merciless. The world was heartless and treated everything as dogs. Only then did they realize the profound meaning of those words. Even a star that was like a speck of dust in the universe was too insignificant for a cultivator's life. They would be crushed easily, not to mention in the vast universe. In fact, the old man and the old ruins emperor were among the lucky ones who escaped. The old voice said again. Right then, the master was like an old man who was basking in the sun under the city wall, and telling the children about the past. The master said with a complicated expression, "The old ruins emperor and I were both born in space warships. These spaceships were the lowest level spaceships. Their crystals and array patterns could not guarantee long-distance travel. They were all stuck in the territory of 2 stars Southgate. 10,000 years ago, Alpha Centauri was just a lonely star without any planets. Perhaps it had existed before, but just like the wood spirit star, it had been swallowed up by the chaotic stars in the long river of history. We received education and cultivated there, but most of the time, we were condensing our blood and halting our lifespan, as if we were hibernating. Each and every tiny spaceship was like a leaf in the ocean, hanging alone in the cold and desolate universe for 1,000 years. Although the headmaster did not elaborate, Everyone could imagine the feeling of loneliness and helplessness. Until one day, the headmaster looked at Jiang Tian and the great co-warriors, bowed deeply, and said with sincere reverence, "The wanderers of the deity land of the previous dynasty, with their great magical power and great vision, used the vast stars as their ships and the world-shaking divine formations as their sails, steered 67 stars and embedded them into the orbit of the South Gate 2 stars. Only then did we see the hope of finding a place to live. Don't make it sound so nice. You're like a bunch of bandits, occupying the deity land like a turtle dove occupying a magpie's nest." The great co-warriors were indifferent, and Tu Fei even sneered. "Don't argue. Let's hear what Mr. Headmaster has to say." Jiang Tian looked calm. There was no sign of emotion on his face. His eyes were as deep as an old well. No one knew what he was thinking. "This old man certainly knows about the crimes we committed 10,000 years ago, but I'd like to tell His Majesty and fellow cultivators that we had no choice but to do what we did back then." The headmaster's hair was white and his body was slightly bent. He looked like an honest old man. His face was full of shame and grief. He said with a pained expression, "The descendants of the Wood Spirit Star weren't warmongers. At that time, we only wanted the permission of the ancient heavenly courts to live in the deity land. We were willing to hand over our cultivation arts and inheritances, and even all the spaceships and resources under our control. We even knelt down and begged for mercy. We were even willing to sign a divine soul contract with the AO Emperor and the other ancestors. However, the AO Emperor and the other ancestors seemed to be very wary of us. They closed the space barriers and locked the sky with divine arrays. They didn't allow us to set foot in the deity land and other worlds. This process lasted hundreds of years. At that time, our space cities and spaceships ran out of energy crystals. The cultivators didn't even have a place to live. That was when we forced our way into the deity land. When we were attacked, we had no choice but to fight back. As a result, the war escalated and broke out step by step. Do you know that those who enter without permission are considered bandits?" Jiang Tian snickered and remained unmoved. He said, "The celestial land is our homeland. You barged in recklessly. Of course, we have the right to kill you. Even if you were all skin and bones at that time. Even if you didn't have a roof to cover your head, without my permission, you can't enter my house." "Teacher, you are so eloquent. Do you still have no intention of repenting?" Jiang Tian's deep eyes shone with a cold light. "No. This old man certainly knows he made a huge mistake back then." The headmaster held his fists and bent low. His white hair was shivering in the air. With a sincere face, he said in a sorrowful voice, 10,000 years ago, the South Gate Galaxy fought with the wanderers of the deity land. The sky collapsed and the land sank. The beautiful deity land became a hell on earth. Countless people were killed or injured. This old man is guilty. The Ruins Emperor is guilty too. This old man is willing to die to apologize to the AO Emperor and the ancestors of the previous dynasty." Everyone was shocked. The headmaster had lowered his head. "Headmaster, why are you guilty? Why are we guilty? We're just looking for a place to live. Don't we have the right to live?" Some cultivators were heartbroken when they saw the headmaster lowering his head. They burst into tears and roared, beating their chests and stamping their feet. This world has always been a dark jungle. Natural selection, survival of the fittest. Whoever has the bigger fist is right. The headmaster and the old Ruins Emperor were originally stronger than the cultivators of the ancient heavenly courts. They could have taken it by force. But they didn't take the deity land by force at first. Instead, they offered gifts out of respect and negotiated nicely. They only took action when they were forced into a corner. How can you blame the headmaster? Someone was indignant and said hatefully, "It was the AO Emperor and the others who didn't know what was good for them. Our Wood Spirit Planet's heritage cultivation techniques are compatible with the Southgate Solar System's nomological Great Tao. If AO Sovereign and company were to open the door and not seal the stars, respectfully inviting the Ruins Emperor and Mr. In, the cultivation techniques of the two solar systems would definitely produce resplendent sparks. They might even be able to research universal level laws and control them. It would have created another glorious era. But in the end, The ancient heavenly courts were arrogant and refused to cooperate with the ruins emperor. Their cultivation arts and divine powers couldn't resonate with the world. They even suffered a backlash from the great Tao of the world and entered an era of Tao damage. Cultivators died like rain. A yellow-robed cultivator shook his head and sighed regretfully. All of you are gravely mistaken. The headmaster's dignified gaze swept across everyone. His voice was as loud as a bell as he shouted, "If this universe is truly a dark, cruel and bloody primitive jungle, we cultivators should also burn our lives and let out the flames of civilization to illuminate the world around us. No matter how weak, short, or insignificant the flames are, we must burn and bloom. We don't have to wait for the torch. If the torch doesn't come, we'll be the torch that leads the way." He stared at the yellow-robed cosmic Darwinist and angrily rebuked, "Just as you said, whoever has the bigger fist is the one who makes the most sense. Now that my fist is bigger than yours, would you think that I'm right if I killed you for no reason?" The yellow-robed cultivator trembled in fear. He knelt on the ground and said with a trembling voice, "I know my mistake." Chapter 16:16. Maybe it was a crucial moment in the peace talks with Jiang Tian, or maybe Master was merciful, but he didn't punish the yellow-robed cultivator. Master retracted his gaze and sighed. "You have to remember, building is always more meaningful than destroying. If the old man and the ruins emperor had been more patient back then, they might have been able to get Ao Huang's approval and build a glorious era together. Instead, the sages have been dead for 10,000 years and see each other as enemies. The two sides have been at war for 10,000 years. The world is collapsing and people are dying. I'm sorry." At that moment, hundreds of millions of cultivators in the ruins of immortality bowed their heads in respect at the same time. His Majesty Tai Chu, 2,000 years ago, the Sky Palace observed that the third star, which had reached a stable balance with the South Gate 10,000 years ago, has expanded rapidly this time, and is moving towards the second star system of the South Gate. After careful calculations, the third star will reach the orbit of the ruins of immortality in 30 years. When that time comes, the fate of the ruins of immortality will be no different from that of the wood spirit planet. Master looked at Jiang Tian and the other cultivators and bowed respectfully. In fact, the old ruins emperor ordered an expedition to Earth because he expected this day to come and find another place to live. But it's different now. Senior Absolute Beginning's strength is unparalleled, and he controls the supreme divine laws. Moreover, he is proficient in formations, weapon refinement, and various other supreme techniques. I think that if we work together, we will definitely be able to find a way to deal with the third star of the South Gate. He directly knelt down. "Headmaster, my name is Yusheng. In this life, I am willing to perform the etiquette of a disciple to Senior Taichu. I am willing to represent the empire of the ruins of immortality and sign a spiritual contract with His Majesty Taichu. The bloodline of the ruins emperor will abdicate the throne and establish a united empire. We will worship His Majesty Taichu as the new master of the celestial court." At that moment, the entire ruins of immortality was dead silent. Above the Xiantian mountain range, and in front of the light screen, hundreds of millions of people watched this scene in disbelief. They were extremely shocked. Yusheng was probably derived from the meaning of surviving a disaster after experiencing 100 difficulties. This name was very unfamiliar to the cultivators of the ruins of immortality. They only knew the two words master, because it was too loud. He was a master of the academy. The saint that appeared once every 5,000 years was like a brilliant star that hung high above the ruins of immortality. His light illuminated the heavens and the earth, illuminating the past, present, and future. He could even be considered the old ruins emperor's teacher. He was like a titan of the northern Dipper, and his status was exalted and noble. But at this moment, he had actually condescended and abandoned that supreme respect, bowing his head and admitting defeat to a cultivator from a remote planet. This was simply inconceivable. However, some living fossils who had lived for thousands of years understood why the headmaster had made such a choice. Jiang Tian had slaughtered Divine Emperor Lai Hua and killed 18 semi-god realm warriors in a row. This already proved that Jiang Tian was qualified to fight against the three top giants. He also had the strength to crush the 100 semi-god realm warriors from the ruins of immortality. Of course, if they joined forces, Jiang Tian would naturally be in danger. However, if he retreated unscathed and counterattacked, then the three of them would be in deep trouble. After all, this vast deity land belonged to the Empire of the Immortal Ruins, as well as the headmaster and the sword god. They were in the open, while Jiang Tian was in the dark. Jiang Tian could totally sneak around and assassinate them one by one. It would take him 10 years to kill them all. Besides, the third planet of the South Gate would bring about a world-ending disaster, which meant that the cultivators of the ruins of immortality would have to divide their attention. What was the point of fighting with Jiang Tian at this point? Even if they killed Jiang Tian, who would be able to escape if the world-ending crisis wasn't resolved? The outcome would still be the same as what happened on the Wood Spirit planet. If they shook hands with Jiang Tian and the other heroes, they would have an extra powerful arm to help them avoid the danger of being destroyed. And to Jiang Tian, this peace negotiation was completely acceptable. Because he was regarded as the master of this world, he could completely complete a large-scale migration and let the descendants of the wanderers in the deity land enter the ruins of immortality. The crisis on Earth would also be resolved, and they would have achieved their goal. This battle was a complete victory for Jiang Tian. What was the point of Jiang Tian killing the headmaster and the others? The key was to solve the problem of the expansion and movement of the 3 planets of the South Gate. Taichu Emperor. Greetings, Your Majesty. The leaders of the sects and the leaders of the families all knelt on the ground, fearing that they would be killed like Divine Emperor Liaohua if they were one step too late. The fact that the headmaster knelt and bowed his head completely crushed their rebellious hearts. Even the headmaster of the academy, who was known as the ancestor of all arts in the ruins of immortality, bowed his head to Jiang Tian. What right did they have to resist? He defeated the enemy without a fight. The Taichu Emperor is invincible, Niu Duotian exclaimed. In his opinion, Jiang Tian had already destroyed the fighting spirit of the people of the ruins of immortality. Those who are good at fighting have no achievements. They can win without shedding blood. Tu Fei, the Green Flood Dragon King, and the other great bandits all had looks of admiration on their faces. Their respect for Jiang Tian had reached an extreme level. Tian Shu even gulped down a mouthful of liquor and shouted happily. In terms of combat power, Jiang Tian had always been steady in every battle. He had never taken any risks and he had never been greedy. When he wasn't strong enough, he would close the space barrier, avoid the sharp edge, hide his strength, and cultivate in seclusion to improve his cultivation. When he didn't have enough materials, he would wander in the lower world, using battle to nurture battle, and plunder cultivation resources everywhere. If he couldn't win, he would flee thousands of miles away, strategically taking a roundabout route. In fact, escaping 1,000 miles away was rare, because Jiang Tian would never fight with an opponent he wasn't confident in. Today, after a long period of accumulation, Jiang Tian finally had the ability to turn the tables. He killed a divine emperor in one battle and 18 soul formation grand cultivators in one battle, shocking the 9 heavens and 10 earths and intimidating the entire ruins of immortality. Master, we can agree to this condition. Yin Zhongzi looked calm, but many thoughts flashed through his mind. In the end, he spoke with his immortal will. The purpose of the war had been achieved. There was no benefit in fighting anymore. In fact, they had no choice but to invade back then. Besides, too much history has passed. There's no need to start a new hatred. Now the most important thing is to solve the problem of the South Gate 3 stars. Bai Mushua's heart suddenly softened. It seemed that the empire of the ruins of immortality wasn't so hateful anymore. Alas, His Majesty Tai Chu will be the master of the deity ground from now on. He's only a nascent soul cultivator, and he's less than 40 years old. At this moment, looking at Jiang Tian who was being worshipped by the headmaster, countless people were shocked and full of admiration. They couldn't wait to be in his place. A real man should be like this. Many people sighed in their hearts. They knew that from now on, there would only be one voice in the ruins of immortality, and that was the voice of the new celestial Varch, Kong Taichu. Headmaster, if you admit your mistakes and turn over a new leaf, I won't kill you. Jiang Tian calmly walked toward the headmaster, while speaking with a calm expression. He spoke without any emotion. Just when everyone thought that the dust had settled, and even the headmaster was smiling, the headmaster suddenly smiled. Suddenly, a cold light burst out between Jiang Tian's fingers and slashed at the headmaster. There was no howling wind, no shaking of the sky, and no reversal of the sun and the moon. Between heaven and earth, there was peace. A gentle breeze blew and white clouds floated gently. But in the next moment, the headmaster's body, which was dozens of miles away, suddenly split open from the middle. Blood dyed the sky red. His jade-like divine bones were broken, and his glittering internal organs were flying. Even his divine treasures were cut in half. After the cold light split the headmaster, it shot into the sky like a dragon and soon fell into Jiang Tian's hand. It was a quaint sword with a quaint design and a dark glow. The heavenly sword. Jiang Tian used a killing move right from the start, not showing any mercy. This time, a strange change happened. No one expected that Jiang Tian would suddenly attack the headmaster at this time. The cultivators of the ruins of immortality were all stunned. Even the killers of the great bandits were surprised and couldn't believe it. Kong Teichu, this old man has come to his senses and sincerely apologized. He is willing to shake hands with you and submit to your orders. He has even signed a divine soul contract with you. Why do you still want to kill me? The headmaster roared with anger, unwillingness, and resentment. The tenacity of a god was made up of pure laws. It was like a second life. As long as a god didn't die, he could gather the chi of heaven and earth, rebuild his body, and be reborn again, just like the DNA fragment left by his original body. Therefore, there was a saying that a soul formation cultivator could have billions of clones and be reborn from a drop of blood. Although this was only a part of the top soul formation cultivators, and not all of them had this ability, it was enough to show how terrifying a soul formation cultivator was. A god was tenacious and powerful. His vitality was at least 100 times stronger than that of a nascent soul cultivator, not to mention a soul formation cultivator at the peak. Everyone saw. The broken god of the headmaster reassembled in the air with difficulty. He even gathered his divine treasures and body. As he gathered his body, he released all kinds of Taoist artifacts and Dharma treasures. Rays of colorful light shone on the headmaster's body. Each of them could withstand the full attack of a peak-stage soul formation cultivator. But Jiang Tian's attack was even more terrifying. A black sword mark, extremely deep and dense, couldn't be eliminated on the headmaster's body. Many overlords also noticed that the sword mark was made up of some extremely small laws. There were thunderbolts, metals, flames, green wood, and thick earth running around the wound. They exploded and disappeared like fireworks and then appeared again. This cycle repeated itself, as if it was immortal. These sword marks were not only on the headmaster's body, but also in his divine treasures and on the god's body. Chapter 16-17. At this moment, countless people were shocked and couldn't believe it. That's impossible. The master has been cultivating for 10,000 years and created the great evolution Tao law. He controls all the Tao in the world and is extremely powerful. How could he be injured by Kong Teichu? After a long time, a big shot who was like a living fossil said in disbelief with a trembling voice. There was deep shock and fear in his eyes, which were even more emotional than when Divine Emperor Lai Hua and the 18 soul formation cultivators were killed by Jiang Tian. Yes, even when Divine Emperor Lai Hua was killed and the sect masters and elders of the Grotto Heavens were killed, he didn't lose his composure. But at this moment, he was in a mess, as if he had been struck by lightning. But no one laughed at him or blamed him, because that was the master. He was a peerless grand cultivator who stood at the top of the Tao, the founder of the Empire of the Ruins of Immortality, the close comrade and spiritual master of the Old Ruins Emperor. He founded the 100 Moon Academy and created the Great Evolution Tao Law, which made the cultivation civilization of the Ruins of Immortality take a big step forward. In the eyes of the cultivators of the Ruins of Immortality, the master was like a superior god who looked down on the world, suppressed the ages and shocked the past, the present and the future. No one could shake him. And yet, such a powerful master had been injured by Jiang Tian. Even if Jiang Tian had fought unannounced and attacked suddenly, it was still terrifying. Not only the people present, but also Jade Lotus Fairy, Yanhua, Xianhu and the other Grand Chancellors of the Academy were dumbfounded. Many mortal cultivators were also staring at the light screen in a daze. Kong Teichu is indeed a vicious and evil person. His heart is filled with killing and evil thoughts, and he doesn't know the meaning of forgive and forget. He's not a kind person. The master has already expressed his willingness to shake hands and make peace, but he still attacked mercilessly. The yellow-robed cultivator shouted angrily, filled with righteous indignation. Let's fight with him. This man is reckless and cruel. He has caused a lot of bloodshed. How can he be the emperor of the ruins of immortality? Why is His Majesty so reckless? Even the big bandits and the group of heroes couldn't understand why Jiang Tian would launch a surprise attack on them. Ji Yusha furrowed her brows, revealing a look of disapproval. As the saying goes, an army filled with righteous indignation is bound to win. A cornered enemy should not be pursued. The ruins of immortality had always believed that the more difficulties one faced, the more intense the resistance would be. Now Jiang Tian had the upper hand. He had killed the Divine Emperor and the sect master of the Grotto Heaven. He had forced the headmaster of the Grotto Heaven to yield. The cultivators of the ruins of immortality were frustrated and humiliated. They were like a barrel of dynamite that could be ignited at any moment. The wisest thing for Jiang Tian to do now was to be conciliatory and make use of them to give them a way out. Even if they wanted to get rid of the leaders of the ruins of immortality, they should wait until the situation stabilized. Instead of going on a killing spree at this moment and intensifying the conflict, causing the other party to launch a frenzied counterattack. The headmaster, the Sky River Star, and the godly swordsman had joined forces. Jiang Tian did not have much chance of winning. At this moment, in Ji Yusha's eyes, although Jiang Tian was like a god of war who had descended from the sky with magnificent combat ability and unparalleled strength, he still lacked the ability to devise strategies. In short, Jiang Tian might be a talented general, or even a talented commander, but he definitely did not have the potential to establish a heavenly court and replace the empire of the ruins of immortality. While Ji Yusha and the others were still confused, they saw Jiang Tian wave his sleeve. A gentle force of the law of wood surged over, gathering the bandits and the assassins in an area of 1 mile. At the same time, a ray of light bloomed from Jiang Tian's storage bag. An ancient, mottled stone tripod that looked like a craggy mountain rock flew over everyone, dropping strands of chaotic aura that looked like silk ribbons to protect everyone. In the next moment, crystal warships in fancy shapes, smooth lines, and glittering in metallic brilliance, as if they were from the future, appeared out of nowhere 1 kilometer away from where the great Ko Dynasty warriors were standing. Invisible array pattern. These are the space-piercing warships jointly developed by the Sky Palace and the refining branch of the Academy. They've been working on this project for 1,000 years. Today they've finally succeeded. Ghost Wolf's eyes were gloomy and cold. After hearing what he said, Tu Fei and Yin Zhongzi were both shocked and sweating. The space-piercing warships were terrifying because of the way they approached their targets. They could enter another space and travel quickly. Other than that, they had also carved an invisible array pattern from the era of the Wood Spirit planet, which could avoid the detection of cultivators' soul consciousness. Under such circumstances, even a divinity transformation stage cultivator with extremely powerful soul consciousness wouldn't be able to detect them at all. It was because even the soul consciousness of a divinity transformation stage cultivator could hardly penetrate into the alternate space. Those space-piercing warships were real war machines. They were dozens of meters long and looked like mountains of different sizes. There were hundreds of them. Those warships were a collection of the best refining techniques in the ruins of immortality. The weapons they were equipped with were shockingly destructive and could easily kill a divinity transformation stage cultivator. They were the ultimate weapons that could be used to resist disasters. It was said that the methods to build those space-piercing warships were left by the Wood Spirit planet. They were made into jade talismans and kept in the space city to survive the devouring disaster of the 3rd planet of the South Gate. The refining methods of the Wood Spirit planet were very advanced and left the Empire of the Ruins of Immortality with abundant resources and heritage. Now the Empire of the Ruins of Immortality had only mastered 30% of the refining methods. On one hand, the history of the wood spirit planet was very long, with a history of more than 1,000,000 years. On the other hand, in the face of a world-ending disaster, the potential of a civilization would be stimulated to the extreme, and the speed of development would increase rapidly in a short time. They used all their resources to research the Dharma artifacts of space travel. Only in this way could they leave the mother planet and find a place to live to protect the roots of their civilization. At this time, everyone understood. The headmaster of the academy had never truly surrendered. He had been deceiving Jiang Tian and the heroes from the beginning to the end. The headmaster first mentioned the world-ending disaster of the ruins of immortality to quench Jiang Tian's anger and arouse his curiosity. The headmaster was very smart. After all, Jiang Tian wasn't fighting for his own cultivation. He wanted to suppress the cultivators of the ruins of immortality for two reasons. One was for the safety of the solar system and Earth, and the other was for justice. He wanted to create a peaceful life for the natives of the deity ground and leave them a place to live. He certainly cared about the safety of the planets in the ruins of immortality. After that, the headmaster talked about the origin of the empire of the ruins of immortality and the brave but miserable struggle of the wood spirit planet, which made Jiang Tian and the heroes sympathize and approve. In fact, to some extent, the deity ground and the heavenly court and the wood spirit planet were in the same boat. They were both facing world-ending disasters, but one was a natural disaster and the other was not a man-made one. Besides, the cultivators of the wood spirit planet also fought desperately for the continuation of their civilization. Jiang Tian and the heroes of the deity ground knew about the history of the ruins of immortality, so they were easy to sympathize with and let down their guard. At least, what he said could make Jiang Tian let down his guard. In the end, the headmaster said that he wanted to work with Jiang Tian, and even made Jiang Tian his master, so that they could solve the disaster of the South Gate stars swallowing the ruins of immortality together. In other words, Jiang Tian wouldn't have a reason to kill him. He would even be grateful to him. However, all of this was just an act by the teacher in order to kill Jiang Tian. The moment Jiang Tian made a divine soul contract with him, the headmaster would immediately attack and fight with Jiang Tian. The sky-piercing battleships that had already closed in would attack the great bandits' killers. Even if Jiang Tian could protect himself under the headmaster's attack, it would be impossible for him to divert his attention to save the heroes of the deity ground. When the god-slaying Dao treasures on the sky-piercing battleships exploded, their power was immense. Space rippled intensely, and dazzling light exploded like suns. The blinding brilliance flooded the area for thousands of miles, illuminating the area as bright as day. Many dragon-shaped and phoenix-shaped flames flew towards Jiang Tian from the battleships. Some golden auras flooded over like waves, which could easily crush a planet. Some poisonous smokes spread in the sky, which were designed to suppress divine souls and spirit power. Even nascent soul deities wouldn't be able to withstand it. They would immediately rot and collapse. Some straight rays of light were shot over instantly. They were extremely bright and sharp, like the slashes created by the god of creation when he created the world. They could cut the chaos, divide the world and change yin and yang. At this moment, Tu Fei and the other heroes of the deity ground their hopes. They were all soul formation cultivators, and they certainly knew how terrifying those god-killing Dao artifacts were. Those were all large superior-grade Dao artifacts and each of them was extraordinarily powerful. Dozens of them were activated at the same time. If they were to face them directly, they wouldn't be able to resist at all, and would be killed in an instant. Although they were only superior-grade Dao artifacts, once the words large and giant were added, they would be extraordinary. The principle was simple. It was like the principle of the use of cannons and pistols. They were both firearms and were born in the same era, but the former was 100 or even 1,000 times more powerful than the latter. The heroes understood. The only thing they could rely on at the moment was the chaotic chi from Jiang Tian's stone cauldron of myriad origin. Chapter 16:18. Oh, so the headmaster was feigning civility and setting up a maze to secretly kill Kong Teichu. The headmaster is wise and resourceful. To deal with an arrogant bandit like Kong Teichu, of course, he has to resort to all means. The headmaster is a learned Confucian. He is an upright gentleman and a lofty saint. He cultivates himself, governs the country and pacifies the world, and illuminates the ages. He values virtue and quality the most, but war is not a meal or embroidery. It is a violent fight to the death. In the face of a peerless villain like Kang Tae-chu, the headmaster can adapt to the situation and act according to the circumstances. He is a real gentleman and saint. At this moment, the cultivators of the ruins of immortality were suddenly enlightened. They admired the headmaster from the bottom of their hearts and praised him. This is the god-slaying Taoist weapon. Although it is a Taoist weapon, it is a large-scale Taoist weapon that is comparable to a divine weapon. Its attack is comparable to that of a dozen peak Huashan realm cultivators. It can easily destroy a peak Huashan realm cultivator. Seeing those war machines, some people sighed with emotion and were shocked. What does Kang Tae-chu mean by taking out a stupid stone? Does he want to use this stone to resist the attack of the god-slaying Taoist weapon? What a joke. The moment they saw the myriad stone cauldron, many cultivators laughed with contempt and disdain. When the god-slaying Taoist weapons began to release their power, the area within a radius of 10,000 miles was dazzling and the space fluctuated violently. Countless mountains were smashed and the earth cracked. Even the ancient Taoist patterns engraved on the walls of a huge city 10,000 miles away that could withstand the attack of a nascent soul realm cultivator were instantly obliterated. Large cracks appeared on the walls of the city. Most of the low-level cultivators within a radius of 10,000 miles were below the gold core realm. There were about 10,000 of them. They felt as if they were being crushed by a mountain and exploded with a bang. The other gold core cultivators were also seriously injured by the aftermath of the god-slaying Taoist weapons. Their bodies were stained with blood, and they were all screaming miserably. Ah! Headmaster, you are so vicious. The aftermath of these weapons is so vicious. How could you not tell us? Headmaster, you are so cruel. I will haunt you even if I become a ghost. Ah! Many cultivators exclaimed and cursed while they staggered on their flying swords and flew toward the periphery like stray dogs or headless flies. They naturally understood the reason. Jiang Tian was too powerful. Once the headmaster used his spiritual awareness to disperse the cultivators of the ruins of immortality, Jiang Tian would be able to detect it. Therefore, the headmaster completely ignored him. Moreover, sacrificing them would make Jiang Tian less vigilant, and the chances of a surprise attack to kill Jiang Tian would be higher. At this moment, their hatred for the headmaster was overwhelming. Many of the fleeing nascent soul stage cultivators had their skin broken while they were still flying. Blood spurted out, their bones and flesh were separated, and their souls were obliterated. Broken limbs, internal organs, and skulls piled up into hills on the ground like raindrops, forming a thick layer. You don't blame the gods. When the headmaster saw this, his expression didn't change at all. His heart was as calm as a lake, and his eyes were as deep as a well without any ripples. Now these ordinary nascent soul stage cultivators were useless to the empire of the ruins of immortality. They were like 3-year-old babies who couldn't go to the battlefield. In order to kill Jiang Tian, they had to be sacrificed. But this kind of sacrifice was not meaningless. At least, they still had their roots and descendants, and their civilization could be passed down. Even soul formation stage cultivators like Xian Nu and Sun Shao, the sect master of the Water Moon Heavenly Cave, felt very uncomfortable after being sucked into the chaotic air curtain of the stone cauldron. As for the other cultivators of the Water Moon Heavenly Cave, several nascent soul stage hall leaders were forced to prostrate on the ground and vomited blood. Many foundation establishment stage cultivators also died. Terrifying. This is just the aftermath of releasing Dharma power, but it's already so terrifying. If we face this power directly, I'm afraid that even the Great Ko dynasty won't be able to withstand it. This is the trump card of the artifact refining in the ruins of immortality. Alas, it seems that the Water Moon Heavenly Cave isn't that important to His Majesty Tai Chu. I can't believe that we weren't sucked into the range of the strange stone cauldron. Xian Nu and Sun Shao roared in their hearts. They were terrified and a little resentful. At this time, the terrifying Dharma power, and great Tao fragments released by many large Taoist artifacts finally bombarded the chaotic qi hanging down from the stone cauldron. But what shocked the headmaster and the cultivators of the ruins of immortality was that the chaotic chi firmly blocked the attacks, and didn't even shake or break them. How is this possible? At this moment, the cultivators on the battleship almost popped their eyes out. They felt that the chaotic chi was extremely heavy, condensed, and magnificent, with a grand and majestic aura of the beginning of all things. The vitality contained inside was extremely vigorous and sacred, as if it could create all things and create a world. But at the same time, it was also extremely tenacious and heavy, as if it could destroy everything. It contained surging power, and a wisp of it could sweep away the bright galaxy and crush thousands of miles of mountains and rivers. This is the chaotic matter. The captain of the Scorpion shouted in disbelief. His hair and beard were all white, but his chi and blood were vigorous. His eyes were like lightning, bright and clear. He was at the 3rd level of the soul formation realm. He was an old general, 1 generation younger than the headmaster, and had lived for thousands of years. He had experienced many wars and survived hundreds of battles. He was very experienced and learned a lot. He had retired and enjoyed his old age. But now, because of the appearance of the demon, he had to go to war and return to the army to protect the country. Young generals were useless against an old demon like Jiang Tian. All the captains and commanders of the invisible fleet were old generals. Some of them had even experienced the War of the Age of Dao damage. Therefore he still had foresight. He had seen some Dharma treasures left by the ancient heavenly court, which could release a wisp of chaotic chi and be very powerful. However, the stone cauldron released by Jiang Tian before his eyes was actually formed from primal chaos chi. It was like smoke, mist, and curtains. This was too shocking. This is the stone cauldron of myriad origin used by Emperor Sheng. It's a fairy artifact. The headmaster exclaimed, and his face changed drastically. As soon as he shouted, many of the ship's commanders were stunned. The so-called fairy artifact usually had 2 meanings. One was a weapon with the power to kill perfected immortals, and the other was a weapon that fell from the celestial world to this world. Fairy artifacts were far more powerful than Dharma treasures, true artifacts, Dao artifacts, and even the legendary holy weapons. No matter what, they were legendary existences. One had to know that to condense a Dao artifact, a soul formation realm cultivator, had to put in a lot of effort and go through hundreds of years of tempering and nourishing by the Great Path. As for holy weapons, it was rumored that there was not a single one in the entire ruins of immortality. Therefore, the immortal artifact was just an illusory legend to everyone. But now, the stone that Jiang Tian casually threw out was called a fairy artifact by the headmaster. How could they not be shocked? After Jiang Tian released the stone cauldron of myriad origin, he was already relieved and did not pay too much attention to it. Because he knew that with the refining skills of the ruins of immortality, it was impossible to break the initial chaotic chi of the stone cauldron. Old man, eat my sword again. Therefore he did not stop. In the blink of an eye, he had already rushed to the headmaster. He raised the absolute heaven sword to his eyebrows and slashed out. Crack! The void shattered again. At this time, Jiang Tian was like an ancient divine emperor who had come back to life, holding the absolute heaven sword. With one slash, he broke the Milky Way and shattered the Great Path. Everyone only saw that the 3-foot sword aura was restrained and silent. The ancient sword was dull and dull, as if it was just ordinary. But the few supreme-grade protective Dao artifacts that the headmaster had released, the layers of Dharma principles and vital chi, and even the traces of the Great Path, shattered out of thin air. Even the verdant mountain peaks that were thousands of meters tall behind him were cut off and smashed down with a loud rumble. The Kuan-Pung Dharma exploded in the space where the sword was pointing, and suddenly a crack about 10,000 feet long suddenly appeared. This crack was not a line but a plane. Under Jiang Tian's sword, the upper and lower space within 10,000 feet was separated, and the middle was annihilated, forming a layer of pure vacuum. Even space did not exist, and the upper and lower space could not be completely healed for a long time. Chapter 16:19. At this moment, the headmaster's body, divine treasure, and divine treasure had just healed when his chest was cut in half again. Blood gushed out like a fountain, and all his Taoist instruments and Dharma treasures were shattered. Moreover, the upper and lower halves of his body were separated by the Kuan-Pung divine law. Although the laws intertwined, his muscles wriggled, and his blood surged, trying to reconnect his body. They could not get close and heal. Kang Taechuyu. He roared and screamed in exasperation. He wanted to curse Jiang Tian, but he had nothing to say. Because he wanted to sneak an attack on Jiang Tian, but he did not expect Jiang Tian to detect it and attack him first. It was not that he was unable to stop Jiang Tian, but Jiang Tian's speed was too fast, causing him to be unable to retreat in one piece. Terrifying, extremely terrifying. The group of assassins was full of admiration, lamenting their inferiority. Jiang Tian's killing and fighting had become a kind of art. When the headmaster was deceiving Jiang Tian had already sensed it. He was just waiting to play along. The headmaster was dispelling Jiang Tian's fighting spirit, but so was Jiang Tian. He was very patient. He waited for the moment when the headmaster thought that his trick had succeeded, and when he was the most relaxed. Jiang Tian did not say anything and attacked with lightning speed. Then, without saying anything, he took advantage of the headmaster's weakness and attacked again. In fact, no matter how strong Jiang Tian's chaotic divine body was, he was still a nascent soul cultivator. No matter how strong his divine law was, Jiang Tian had not touched the great Tao yet. And the headmaster was a peak soul formation cultivator, an unparalleled giant. He also had the Dian Dao law, and his strength was comparable to Jiang Tian's. In addition, the headmaster had accumulated battle experience in his 10,000 years of life. He also had the will to kill Jiang Tian when the ruins of immortality was in a disaster. If Jiang Tian had not taken the initiative, it would have been very difficult for Jiang Tian to kill him in this battle. Even if Jiang Tian could win, it wouldn't be as straightforward as it was now. Ji Yusha had guessed wrongly time and time again. At this moment, she felt as if her face had been slapped swollen. She no longer dared to comment or guess Jiang Tian's battle. Senior Taichu is too strong. At this moment, the beautiful Bai Muxue was so beautiful that even Long Shengnan had a look of worship in her eyes. She was so excited that her curvaceous body trembled slightly, and her full chest heaved up and down violently. Jiang Tian's first strike could be considered as an advantage. The headmaster did not react in time, and Jiang Tian succeeded. However, these two swords were still broken by Jiang Tian's sword even though the headmaster's myriad Dao roared, and all kinds of protective Taoist artifacts and laws were activated. It was definitely not a fluke. Jiang Tian had the ability to severely injure the headmaster. This sword is too terrifying. Could this be the legendary ultimate sword Dao? On a distant mountain peak, a middle-aged man dressed in black stood upright like a sword. His eyes were deep and his hands were trembling slightly as he spoke with a complicated expression. This person was one of the sword servants of the sword god of the ruins Emperor Palace. He was the #1 sword servant, which was equivalent to his last disciple. His strength had already reached the 3rd level of the soul formation realm. He was several times stronger than Tong Yujian, who had been killed by Jiang Tian. He was on par with the divine emperor. Ultimate sword Dao. The sword servants at the side all sucked in a breath of cold air. Their expressions turned solemn. Everyone had heard of the ultimate sword Dao. It was rumored that the sword god of the soul formation realm could only control the highest realm when he cultivated his sword arts to an extremely high level. Rumor had it that the infinite sword laws and great Dao of the sword were condensed into a single strand. It was then refined and tempered to the limit, allowing one to break all Dharma with a single strike. Even the sword god of the ruins Emperor Palace had only touched the edge of the ultimate sword Dao. He dared not claim to have complete control over it. As for Jiang Tian, a mere nascent soul realm cultivator, no matter how heaven-defying his strength was, it was unbelievable that he could unleash the ultimate sword Dao. It was like a myth. But in front of them, Jiang Tian's Dharma laws were condensed to the extreme, not revealing the slightest bit. His sword swept across the sky, traversed 1,000 miles, broke thousands of Dharma laws and cut the supreme great Dao. If that wasn't the ultimate sword Dao, what was? Thinking of that, everyone felt as if they were facing a peerless god of death. They became more and more frightened. But it was too difficult for them to accept. The youngest sword servant, the 7th sword servant, looked angry and said coldly, "How is that possible? Kang Taechu can do something that even master can't do." In my opinion, Kong Taechu has taken advantage of the heaven-severing sword. It's not because of his strength. But a nascent soul realm cultivator activating an immortal artifact is like a 3-year-old child swinging a giant hammer. How many times can I see that? How can Kong Taechu? Yes. If Master attacks, Kong Taechu won't even be able to withstand one strike. Another sword servant sneered. In any case, Jiang Tian's second strike had severely injured the headmaster again, which shocked all the cultivators and mortals in the ruins of immortality. They couldn't believe it. The headmaster, who was known as the top sage of the ruins of immortality, and appeared once every 5,000 years, had been defeated just like that? Jiang Tian had injured the headmaster again. To them, it was like Jiang Tian had broken an immortal legend. Is the headmaster going to be defeated? The chancellors of the academy, Xianhu Jade Lotus Fairy and the others all looked worried and their hearts were in their mouths. But the most shocked person was the headmaster himself. This grand sage, who founded the Empire of the Ruins of Immortality and created the Dian Dao Law, stood at the top of the ruins of immortality. With the 100 Moon Academy as a link, he had preached for 1,000 years and had countless disciples. He knew the principle that even a goshawk would do its best to catch a rabbit. When facing Jiang Tian, he had been careful and cautious enough. In his opinion, no matter how powerful Jiang Tian was, he wouldn't be able to escape from the joint attack of him and the invisible battleship. But he didn't expect Jiang Tian to notice it. But he didn't expect that not only did Jiang Tian notice it, but he also acted so decisively and ruthlessly. He used his killing move as soon as he attacked. He directly used his trump card. He also didn't expect that Jiang Tian could severely injure him. He cut the space and formed a space chaos hole, which destroyed his body, divine treasures and deities and made them unable to heal. He already had the body of a deity. His deity and his body had merged into one. It was not a mortal body, nor was it an ordinary life. It was a body of laws, a divine body of the great path. Even if 100 ordinary soul formation cultivators attacked him together, they wouldn't be able to leave the slightest mark on his body. Roar! Kong Taechu, how dare you hurt me? The broken deity of the headmaster roared, and the two pieces of broken deity retreated quickly like shooting stars. His deity couldn't break through the plane of the space chaos hole. He could only heal after crossing the plane of the space chaos hole. However, although the absolute heaven sword was an immortal artifact, no matter how strong Jiang Tian was, cutting through the void and forming a space chaos hole was a great divine skill that defied the heavens. It couldn't last for long. The plane of the space chaos hole that isolated heaven and earth gradually melted and shattered like thin ice under the spring sun. In addition, the deity of the headmaster was also flying out. In just 3 flicks of the fingers, he had crossed the range of the broken space. The deity finally succeeded in reforming. The headmaster was indeed an incomparable giant, a peerless powerhouse who stood at the top of the ruins of immortality. The Dian Dao Law was indeed extraordinary and unpredictable. It was far beyond ordinary techniques. Under the healing of the deity, all kinds of divine principles roared and quickly reformed his body. Kong Taechu, you deserve to die. The headmaster's body quickly reformed, but after all, he had been seriously injured twice. Obliterating or suppressing the absolute heaven sword mark left by Jiang Tian had consumed a lot of his power of divine principles. His aura retreated like a receding tide and fell rapidly. His cultivation had already fallen to the early stage of the soul formation realm. At this moment, his hatred for Jiang Tian was overwhelming. Without saying a word, he took out a magic treasure. This ruler was like a ferrule. It was less than 2 feet long, and made of unknown green jade. It was sparkling and translucent, simple and ancient, and gave people a kind of natural charm. All kinds of complicated Tao patterns were inscribed on it. The sun, the moon, the stars, the yin and yang of heaven and earth, the ancient ancestors, immortals, demons, spirits, birds, beasts, insects, and fish were all contained in it. What kind of treasure is this? At this moment, in front of the light screen, hundreds of millions of people felt the extraordinariness of this treasure. They were frightened and cried out in surprise. Sky-leveling ruler. Master. He's using his final trump card. Especially the chancellors of the academy. After recognizing this treasure, they were even more shocked and turned pale. Chapter 1620. The Sky-Leveling Ruler. This treasure was passed down from the era of the Wood Spirit Planet's overlord. It was far more powerful than a Tao artifact and could be called a sacred weapon. Back then, the headmaster had held this treasure and accompanied the old ruins emperor to kill the sages of the ancient heavenly courts in the deity ground. It was said that the Ao emperor had died under this ruler. After the establishment of the Empire of the Ruins of Immortality, he used this treasure as a ruler to pacify the world, overthrow hundreds of families, wipe out thousands of sects, suppress many grotto heavens and dominate the 100 Moon Academy. During this time, countless soul formation cultivators had died under this ruler. As soon as this treasure appeared, it became 1,000 feet long and stretched across the sky. In fact, a Dharma treasure 1,000 feet long wasn't considered big in this world. But it didn't mean that the bigger the Dharma treasure, the more powerful it was. Everyone saw it. The Tao patterns and runes engraved on it let out a bright light and turned into phantoms that rose into the sky. There was an azure dragon in the sky that ignited heavenly fire, a black tortoise that sank to the ground and attracted Xianming water. Starlight fell and turned into power. There was also the sound of ancient people praying. It was hazy, noisy, and ethereal, like the chanting of Buddhism and the music of heavenly beings. As the sky-leveling ruler was activated, heaven and man were connected. The 3,000 great Taos in this world roared, and all kinds of Dharma laws boiled like an ocean. At this moment, in the vast ruins of immortality, countless creatures felt their surroundings distort and become unreal. It was as if the world had lost some of its power and became weak. Some even felt discomfort and dizziness. The headmaster has refined the sky-leveling ruler for thousands of years, and it has become one with the 3,000 great Taos in this world. When this treasure moves, the Dharma laws and great Taos of the entire ruins of immortality gather together and form a full-strength attack. Its power is really terrifying. An elder who was like a living fossil shook his head and sighed. No matter how strong Kong Teichu is, can he resist the power of a cultivation planet? Looking up at the light screen, Jade Lotus Fairy snorted, and a proud look appeared on her face. Jiang Taichu, no matter how capable you are, you won't be able to defend against the power of this treasure. Grand Chancellor Yan Hua's eyes also shone brightly as she looked disdainfully at Jiang Tian, as if she was looking at a dead man. Kong Teichu's soul will be destroyed, and his bones will be ground to dust. Under the large light screen of the academy, countless disciples of the academy were roaring and gnashing their teeth. Their eyes were extremely cold as they cursed Jiang Tian to die. This treasure sounded simple, but in fact, the headmaster of the academy had refined the sky-sweeping ruler, which contained profound knowledge of tactical arrays and talismans. It took the headmaster of the academy tens of thousands of years of hard work and daily sacrificial refining to achieve the unity of heaven, man, and object. They could sense each other and become one. It was much more powerful than the combined power of 10 peak-stage soul formation cultivators, and was much more powerful than the 1,000 Tao cauldron used by Divine Emperor Lai Hua. It was close to the legendary Void Return level. It's just a saint artifact. You know that I have an immortal artifact, yet you still dare to take it out and embarrass yourself. Just as the great co-warriors were alarmed and reminded Jiang Tian to be careful, Jiang Tian's face showed a hint of disdain as he slashed out with his sword again. Swish! This sword contained the divine rule of Kunpeng Nirvana breaking space. It was extremely ingenious and contained the ultimate sword Tao, reaching the peak of the sword Tao. The great way of the sword was extremely sharp, as if it was splitting the sky and the earth and dividing yin and yang. It easily destroyed space and formed a chaotic space again. Crack! With a soft sound, the sky-sweeping ruler was cut into 2 pieces as if it were made of paper. Then the absolute heaven sword lightly split the headmaster from head to crotch again. No! The headmaster of the academy shouted in shock and anger. This time, the headmaster of the academy's deity was full of holes and collapsed. When it was reformed again, the deity who was originally like a strong young man had transformed into a weak baby. The divine treasure that was originally like a celestial palace was reformed again after it was broken. It was in the form of a spiritual fetus, which was as weak as a piece of paper. Jiang Tian's sword slashed the headmaster of the Academy's Dharma power from the soul formation level to the nascent soul level. How is this possible? He broke the sky-sweeping ruler with one sword and cut down the headmaster's level. Jade Lotus Fairy's pretty face was full of shock. Her delicate body trembled violently and her beautiful eyes widened as if she had been bitten by a Chinese alligator. Could he be the divine fetus? Yan Hua, who was full of confidence in the headmaster of the academy, now looked as if she had eaten a dead child. It was extremely ugly. This is troublesome. Kong Teichu's divine rule is pervasive like mercury flowing into the ground. It has penetrated deep into the internal organs, and is so stubborn that it has reached the acupoints and bones. I'm afraid it will be difficult for the headmaster to restore the divine treasure and deity. Xianhu's expression changed drastically. His whole body was cold, and his heart felt like it had fallen into the nine nether abyss. The situation in front of them made them completely dumbfounded. The sky-sweeping ruler. Firstly, the headmaster of the academy had used it to pacify the world. Secondly, it was on the same level as the heaven and earth. It could activate the 3,000 great ways of the ruins of immortality, and the endless divine rule. One had to know that the power of a cultivation planet was a terrifying existence. However, he did not expect that Jiang Tian would cut through it with a single sword strike, as if he was cutting vegetables. Not only that, Jiang Tian destroyed the headmaster of the academy's divine treasure, and destroyed the deity. This was equivalent to cutting off half of the headmaster's life. Kong Teichu, I will not rest until I am dead. The headmaster of the academy's eyes were about to split open, and he was in a state of madness. All kinds of divine rule and great Tao fragments roared all over his body. He wanted to restore his peak level, but it was to no avail. Jiang Tian's 3 consecutive swords contained the divine rule of Kun Peng. Every time, he created a chaotic space hole. Not only did he severely injure the headmaster of the academy, he also took the opportunity to leave various divine rule lingering around the headmaster of the academy's wounds to destroy them. His deity directly disintegrated and fell to the nascent soul realm. With another slash, the headmaster of the academy's nascent soul was about to be shattered. Although the headmaster of the academy hated Jiang Tian to the core, he had lived for tens of thousands of years, and had experienced countless storms and waves. He still remained calm. He noticed that he'd still severely underestimated Jiang Tian's strength. Jiang Tian originally possessed the combat strength of a divine transformation realm cultivator, and coupled with the enhancement of immortal artifacts and divine materials like the Absolute Heaven Sword and the Source Stone Cauldron, he was even more terrifying to the extreme. Don't you know how to support me? Stupid. He retreated towards the many invisible battleships in a panic like a stray dog as he spoke with his divine consciousness. Rumble. Many invisible battleships and powerful war machines lined up in the sky and blocked the sun. All kinds of large Taoist artifacts trembled and roared as they bombarded the great bandits. After all, according to the previous plan, their responsibility was to chase after the great bandits to interfere with the battle between Jiang Tian and the headmaster of the academy. They did not let them attack Jiang Tian, because according to the previous deduction, when Jiang Tian was disturbed, the headmaster of the academy would not be surprised at all to kill Jiang Tian. However, they did not expect that a stone thrown by Jiang Tian could block all the attacks, which made them feel like they were muggles. In truth, these captains and generals were all veterans of hundreds of battles. They were experienced and were also experts who could adapt according to the situation. However, the problem was that Jiang Tian acted too quickly. The situation took a sudden turn for the worse. All of this happened in the blink of an eye. Full speed ahead. Rescue the headmaster of the academy and stop Kong Teichu. After being reminded by the headmaster of the academy, the captains and commanders came to their senses. Many of the battleships abandoned the great bandits and rushed towards Jiang Tian like lightning. All kinds of large Taoist artifacts were activated. Bright light burst out, strange phenomena erupted, and the momentum was earth-shattering. They bombarded Jiang Tian and blocked the path between Jiang Tian and the headmaster of the academy, like a sky curtain across the sky. The headmaster of the academy is retreating. How is this possible? He is standing at the top of all the Taoists in the ruins of immortality, and the divine person who broke the eternal night of the ruins of immortality. How could he be seriously injured and be defeated by Kong Taechu? Seeing this scene, many cultivators of the ruins of immortality were shocked to the extreme. They felt that their worldview had collapsed. In their hearts, the supreme and omnipotent headmaster of the academy was being chased and forced to flee in embarrassment. They could not bear it. Humph! You want to stop me with a piece of scrap metal? Headmaster of the academy, you are dead meat. Jiang Tian laughed. The Kuanping stepped on the air and refracted the curve of its body. It was as graceful as a dragon and as graceful as a butterfly. It dodged all kinds of attacks from the battleships, which were powerful enough to kill a divine transformation realm cultivator. Within a second, it crossed 100 miles and came to the side of the first battleship. This battleship was about 1,000 feet long. Its thick hull was covered with dense flying swords, which made it look like a huge metal hedgehog. Its name was simple and straightforward. It was called 10,000 Swords. This was a battleship that was mainly used for attacking. Once it was released, it would shoot out tens of thousands of Taoist instrument flying swords at the same time. Even a divine transformation realm cultivator would be turned into a sieve. Jiang Tian flew over. Without using any Dharma power, he punched the hull of the battleship. Clang! A fist-sized hole appeared where Jiang Tian's fist hit. That hole appeared to be burning red, but as soon as the hole appeared, it immediately disappeared. This was because the surrounding ship's hull was melted by the high temperature of Jiang Tian's high-speed punch. A long section of the ship's hull quickly became burning red. The Taoist patterns on the flying swords were annihilated. As if they were made of red wax, they were melted by the heat and flowed down. The burning red quickly spread to the entire battleship. Soon the entire battleship was covered. The 10,000 Swords was like a big piece of iron taken out from a big iron furnace. Many cultivators inside, including a half-divine transformation realm captain, were turned into ashes in an instant. Then Jiang Tian's punches and kicks swept everything in his way. He was like a god of war that had descended and slaughtered his way into the group of enemies that couldn't withstand a single blow, and he rampaged through and destroyed everything in his path. After the punch, the million-ton warship blossomed like an enormous fireball. The explosion of the crystal reactor was no less powerful than the explosion of 100 nuclear weapons at the same time. The metal liquids emitting dark red brilliance spurted out radially like blossoming buds. The molten metal dispersed into a storm of scorching metal magma. He kicked out like a heavenly saber. A magnificent battleship about 3,000 feet long was split in half. The cultivators inside were all shattered into pieces by the violent force. Their divine souls, golden cores, and nascent souls were all destroyed at the same time. They were completely killed before they could even scream. Jiang Tian punched and kicked, massacring everything in his way. In less than a minute, he destroyed the invisible battleship that the Empire of the Ruins of Immortality was proud of, and that they had spent thousands of years to develop and build. He arrived in front of the horrified master, who had not recovered at all. Chapter 1621. This scene was too shocking. It seemed that as Jiang Tian rushed past, the fleet of battleships turned into a sea of fire, and exploded like flowers blooming behind Jiang Tian. This is the invisible fleet of the Ruins of Immortality's artifact forging and array formation. Under the Academy's light screen, countless disciples cried out in shock. In fact, Jiang Tian's speed was too fast. Even the most advanced imprint Dharma artifacts in the Ruins of Immortality could not capture him. Even if a soul formation cultivator's divine sense tried to track him, they would feel dizzy and nauseous. In the eyes of everyone, it was as if Jiang Tian's body shook and many battleships and war machines fell into a sea of fire and exploded one after another. How can he be so powerful? Jade Lotus Fairy's face changed color. She was as pale as a corpse that had been dead for 3 days. Her delicate body trembled slightly and she shivered. As a cultivation civilization that had escaped from the apocalypse 10,000 years ago, the cultivators of the Ruins of Immortality had always been full of a sense of crisis, and were very careful and cautious. After Jiang Tian killed Divine Emperor Hanshi, the Ruins of Immortality had already sensed a deep crisis. They prepared for a decisive battle, and mobilized the power of the entire Ruins of Immortality to speed up the development of these war machines. As an array formation master, Jade Lotus Fairy understood this best. These battleships came from the design plans left behind by the Wood Spirit Planet civilization. They had taken thousands of years of hard work from countless people in the ruins of immortality, and used the cultivation resources of the entire ruins of immortality. They represented the highest level of artifact forging and array formation in the ruins of immortality. However, all of this was broken by Jiang Tian in a matter of minutes and seconds. It could be said that at this moment, Jade Lotus Fairy's worldview was about to collapse. She was full of disbelief, as if she had seen a ghost. Master has already used the swordsman's secret technique, but he still can't break down the traces of the divine law that Kong Teichu left in his body. Grand Chancellor Xian, whose face was full of horror and disbelief. The swordsman's secret technique was one of the 9 great heavenly techniques of the Wood Spirit Planet. It was mainly used for healing and recovery. However, the headmaster's mastery of this secret skill was so profound that it had never been seen before. He had reached the peak and reached the point where he could be reborn from a drop of blood and regenerate his physical body in the blink of an eye. It was truly miraculous. But at this moment, no matter how hard the headmaster tried to use the heavenly skill of He, the Dharma that Jiang Tian had left on his wounds could not be destroyed. It was like the grass on the lily plain that would grow again when the spring breeze blew. It was as if it could exist forever. Oh no, he caught up. Sir, be careful. At this moment, countless disciples of the academy were dumbfounded, and cries of surprise rose and fell. The crowd saw that Jiang Tian's figure flashed like a fleeting shadow, crossing the distance of 100 miles and arriving in front of the teacher. The cold sword radiance was like snow, and it carried a terrifying killing intent. It was like a silver stream as it directly descended from the 9 heavens. At this moment, the headmaster used the heavenly skill of attainment, and his speed was as fast as lightning. Although he had fallen to the nascent soul level, he was still a soul formation grand cultivator. Perhaps not many people in the ruins of immortality could reach such speed. Under the extreme speed of Jiang Tian's Kuan-Peng, the headmaster was like a disabled old man who could not move freely. In the blink of an eye, Jiang Tian had caught up with him. Ah! Is the headmaster going to die today? Kong Teichu, this demon is so vicious. Headmaster. Our great headmaster is being slaughtered by a thief today. Kong Teichu, you will be punished by the heavens for your reckless actions. You will die a horrible death. In an instant, countless cultivators and mortals in the vast ruins of immortality shouted and cursed. They could not wait to skin Jiang Tian and refine his divine soul to vent their anger. Good. This old thief is finally finished. Your Majesty, kill him and avenge the ancient sages. On the other hand, the great co-warriors were cheering. Their eyes were filled with excitement, and they clenched their fists again. The headmaster was the right-hand man of the old ruins emperor. He had participated in the War of the Age of Dao damage, and killed countless people. Millions of corpses were lying on the ground. It could be said that his hands were stained with the ruins of immortality of the ancients and sages. He was truly an invader. Most hateful of all was that after the ruins of immortality imperial court was established, this invader, the war maniac, had transformed into a peerless Confucian scholar. Every word he spoke was filled with benevolence, righteousness, and morality. He spoke of the righteousness of all living things, and he always referred to himself as heaven, earth king, father, and teacher. He was worshipped and revered by the masses, as if he could save them all, and was a lofty and benevolent god. Now he had fallen to the nascent soul level. He was no match for Jiang Tian in a battle of the same level. He would be cut into ashes with one slash. Just when everyone, including the headmaster himself, thought that he could not dodge Jiang Tian's attack. Kong Teichu, stop! The sword god is coming. A voice that was full of majesty and sharp like a precious sword came from the horizon. It seemed to be very far away, hundreds of miles or even thousands of miles away. This voice was not a normal sound wave, but a secret true essence technique. It was 10 times or 100 times faster than normal sound waves. A wise man with an extraordinary cultivation saw that when the word Jiang rang out, a bright light appeared in the horizon. The bright light instantly turned into a bright shooting star, cutting through 100 li of heaven and earth, dividing the sea of clouds and stars. When the word also fell, that shooting star had already arrived behind Jiang Tian. It was actually a sharp sword light. The speed of this flying sword was already fast to an unimaginable degree. The sword god is coming. The sword god in white. In an instant, the cultivators near the Xiantian mountain range, and the mortals at the border of the ruins of immortality, all knelt on the ground with worship in their eyes, as if they had seen a god. They looked at him with even more respect than when they saw the headmaster. All the cultivators knew that the headmaster was not a cultivator from the Southgate Galaxy, but from the distant Big Dipper Galaxy. It was rumored that the cultivation civilization there was even stronger. The sword gods Dharma and Great Tao were superior to the cultivators of the ruins of immortality. Unlike the headmaster, who used the method of academies to open the doors of convenience and recruit disciples, the god of swords took the path of elites. He cultivated no more than 10 sword servants, but every one of them had reached the divine transformation realm, becoming another major branch in the ruins of immortality. They were highly respected, and even relied heavily on by the ruins emperor's palace. Seeing that the sword god had struck, even the headmaster retreated like a comet falling from the sky. At the same time, there was a smug and hideous smile on his face. He said coldly, "Jiang Taichu, I have strong backup. You cannot kill me. Stop." Yes, although he was in deep danger and his life was hanging by a thread, he was still very confident, as if he had the pearl of wisdom in his hands. Because he could only defend against the sword god's attack. And he had to do his best. Otherwise, Jiang Tian would definitely die. The sword god used the holy weapon, Flying Fairy, and he had already used all his strength. It was the fastest, strongest, and most poisonous sword he had ever used. The headmaster thought that if he were in his shoes, even if he was at the peak of the soul formation realm, he would not have a 50% chance of blocking the sword god's attack, and would be seriously injured. "Do you want to fight to the death?" The headmaster smiled smugly. On the one hand, he was sure that Jiang Tian would give up the chase. On the other hand, he was disturbing Jiang Tian's Taoist heart with mental disturbances. In this way, whether he escaped or killed by the sword god, he would have a higher chance of winning. A battle between masters was not only a clash of physical bodies, magic treasures, supernatural powers, and dharma. It was also a battle of spirit and soul. My sword can only advance and never retreat, and it can never return. Jiang Tian's face was as calm as an ancient well without any ripples. His cold gaze was as sharp as a sword, neither increasing nor decreasing, and did not move in the slightest. That kind of firmness made the headmaster's heart palpitate. "Stop. He wants to fight to the death with me? Is he not afraid of death? Why can he? Even if I've been through thousands of years of war on the battlefield, killing in the imperial court, and bathing in the bloody rain in Jianghu, I've never trained myself to be so fearless of death and willing to die together with others." Thoughts surged in the headmaster's mind. He was full of astonishment, surprise, and disbelief. His spiritual soul and physical body were numb and stiff for a moment. His physical body and dharma defense were a little slower. In a battle between masters, a moment was enough to kill one person. "I've been hit." A kind of coldness hit him. The headmaster came back to his senses instantly, but it was too late for him to use the 9 heavenly skills to escape and defend himself. I can't accept this. The crisis of the world is not." Amidst the headmaster's unwilling and desperate cries, Jiang Tian's heaven-extinguishing sword trembled. All sorts of divine precepts exploded and destroyed the headmaster's nascent soul and physical body. They were smashed into pieces, turning into a rain of blood that scattered across the sky. The extremely dense chi of essence, and the vast surging vital chi swept across the 9 heavens and 10 lands like raging waves beating against the shore. At this moment, the entire ruins of immortality, and even the cultivators in the 2nd level and 3rd level worlds who saw this scene through the light screen were stunned. They stood motionless as if they had been struck by lightning. The founder of the Imperial Court of the Ruins of Immortality, the founder of the 100 Moons Academy and the Diantao Law, and one of the 3 giants of the world, the headmaster, Yu Sheng, died. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.